Chapter 26:15. How can a dead soul die? He controls death. Not many can kill a descendant of the Death Master, right? Among us, there are only two people who have absolute confidence in killing a soul, right? One of them was a powerful Yao Guang. The other was the natural nemesis of the death realm, the life realm. Yao Guang had been with them all this time and had no time to kill a soul. The only possibility was Lulua. It's not me, it's not me. Lulua's face was red with anxiety. If I killed a soul, I wouldn't be unharmed. Although her abilities were slightly higher than a dead soul's, how could she kill a dead soul without paying a price? Sizing her up, everyone agreed. Lulua was indeed unlikely. But then who could it be? A dead soul in the upper palace, killed without a trace? This was a provocation to the entire upper palace. Yanran, do you have anything to say? Yao Guang's face sank. The dead soul had been with Yanran. Yanran said calmly, I saw who killed the dead soul. What? Everyone looked over. Yao Guang's eyes were filled with reproach, releasing the terrifying aura of a master. Why didn't you say? Since Yanran had seen the dead soul's death, why hadn't she mentioned it to them? This was a huge matter. Yanran said helplessly, I only saw a mysterious person appear in the dead soul's room. I didn't expect the dead soul to meet with a mishap. Who would have thought that he who controls death would die one day? This was reasonable. Who was it? Did you see it clearly? Yao Guang asked, facing the stares of Yao Guang and her colleagues. Yanran did not dare hide anything. I saw it. It was an outsider. Outsider? Everyone, including Yao Guang, looked in the direction of the hot spring. Was there only one outsider in the upper palace? That was Su Yu, whom Yao Guang had brought back. Yao Guang's heart sank. In fact, he had suspected Su Yu from the start. The dead soul was very difficult to kill. To be able to do so without causing a commotion, it could only be this mysterious and powerful senior. He was just hoping for a fluke. Yao Guang gripped a small booklet in his sleeve. This was a protective magic treasure, which the chief sovereign of fate had given him. Upon encountering danger, all he had to do was take out the book and write down the name of the enemy, as well as the fate that was about to befall him. The enemy's fate would change on the spot. If he wrote instant death, the enemy would die immediately. This was the domain of the chief sovereign of fate. No one could avoid it. If it was really Su Yu's doing, Yao Guang would have no choice but to use the booklet. No one could wantonly kill the people of the upper palace, including Su Yu. Brother Yao Guang, is that the person in the hot spring? Let's kill him together, someone suggested. His thoughts represented everyone else's. Without a doubt, it could only be done by that person. Yao Guang held the booklet tightly and said slowly, This is an important matter. We can't be careless. Yanran, when the person in the hot spring comes out, can you confirm whether it is him or not? Yanran affirmed, Yes. Although he covered his face, I still remember his aura. The light-shaking realm's gaze grew cold. Fine. Everyone, prepare yourselves. If it really is this person, please don't be stingy with your treasures and attack together. This person's strength is unfathomable. If we're careless, we might be the ones to die. His heart was filled with guilt. It was the people he brought back that caused the deaths of the dead souls. At this moment, he was greatly shaken by his own divination. The person who could bring him such a great opportunity was the murderer of the upper palace members? We will listen to Brother Yao Guang's command. It had to be said that the members of the upper palace were quite united. With one person dead, the other members were united. Follow me. Under Yao Guang's lead, a total of 7 members of the upper palace came to the entrance of the hot spring. They were all secretly preparing powerful, defensive magic treasures. Once Yanran confirmed that Su Yu was the murderer, what awaited him would be the attack of the 7 masters' personal defensive treasures. By then, Su Yu would not be able to escape. Su Yu, who was completely unaware of this, was making his final attempt. 799, 800. Finally, the marks of Tao in his body were completely complete. All the power within the marks of Tao burst forth like a mountain torrent. Su Yu suddenly felt as if his body was about to be broken from the inside out by that unparalleled power. His whole body felt swollen. At the same time, the Tao energy of heaven and earth gathered above Su Yu's head like thousands of streams returning to the sea. With the hot spring as the center, the profound energy within a radius of 1,000,000 miles rushed over rapidly. One could see with the naked eye that patches of thick, condensed dark clouds rolling over, shrouding the entire upper palace. Different profound energy dark clouds collided and rubbed against each other, causing a series of lightning bolts and a deafening roar of thunder. The many descendants of the masters stared at the scene in shock. Why did this scene look like someone was going through a tribulation? Even when breaking through to the Path Master, the strange phenomenon of heaven and earth is no more than this, isn't it? Lulua was stunned. Such thick, profound energy was like 800 middle nirvana realm Xian Dao masters breaking through to the nirvana realm at the same time. Yao Guang shook his head solemnly. No, even breaking through to the Path Master can't produce such a magnificent phenomenon of heaven and earth. He was a Path Master himself, so he knew this all too well. What is that person doing in the hot spring? How can he cause such a terrifying phenomenon so casually? Everyone's scalps went numb. They could not help but tighten their grip on their respective treasures. As lightning flashed and thunder roared, the dark clouds began to fall like rain, falling into the hot spring. Su Yu sat cross-legged in the hot spring. There was a whirling current on the top of his head, catching all the liquid profound energy that dripped down and integrating it into his Tao mark. The power within his Tao mark absorbed the majestic profound energy and became even purer. When all the profound energy had been absorbed, Su Yu clenched his fist, almost tearing the space apart. Early stage of void nirvana. Su Yu's face showed a hint of joy. His current cultivation was at the early stage of nirvana, but his pure profound energy was close to the early stage of void nirvana. Among the nirvana strong men of the same realm, there should not be many who could compete with him in terms of strength. Su Yu was exceptionally satisfied with the successful breakthrough in his cultivation. He slowly stood up. The hot spring where he was already extremely clear. There was not a single trace of impurity in it. It's time to leave, Su Yu said to himself. His goal had been achieved, so it was time to leave the upper palace. However, just as he stood up, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. In his left eye, 8 great spinning domains appeared uncontrollably. The 8 great domains appeared on their own and shot out an 8-colored beam of light. The beam of light broke through all obstacles. The many seals of the hot spring could not stop the beam of light for even a moment, and they were penetrated on the spot. The many descendants of the great masters outside the hot spring were startled, and they stared at the beam of light of the 8 great domains in shock. Those are 8 kinds of supreme domains. It seems like only the ancient god Jilong can combine the 8 great supreme domains into one, right? Could it be that the one inside could the one inside be the ancient god Jilong himself? Chapter 26:16. There was no need to doubt the relationship between ancient god Nine Dragon and the god. If he really was ancient god Nine Dragon's true body, wouldn't they, the descendants of the hegemons? When she thought of this, Yao Guang shuddered. The pillar of light was extinguished after a while. All of the hegemon descendants felt their hearts clench. The enemy was about to come out. The important thing now was not that this person had killed the souls, but that this person was very likely to be ancient god Nine Dragon's true body. Creak, creak! Amidst the deathly silence, a series of soft noises could be heard. That was the sound of the seals being opened layer by layer. He was coming out. Gulp! The sound of swallowing saliva could be heard. As more and more seals were undone, They became more and more nervous. He could even hear the rapid beating of his heart. Creak, as the last seal was unlocked. A figure slowly walked out of the hazy mist of the hot spring. The figure was surrounded by an 8-colored halo. 8 different sovereign domains revolved around his body. Ah, ancient god Nine-Dragon. Those with weaker temperaments immediately began to scream, activating the magic treasures the sovereign had personally bestowed upon them. Yao Guang hurriedly shouted, "No!" If his assailant was not ancient god Nine-Dragon's true body, then he had killed an innocent. If he did, he would be infuriating ancient god Nine-Dragon's true body. How could he act rashly? Freeze! However, the figure walked out and said slowly. The person who was about to activate the domain was frozen on the spot. Time domain. The pupils of the sovereign descendants constricted, and their hearts filled with terror. Who? As the mist dissipated, Su Yu's figure was revealed. His body was covered with a layer of 8-colored light, and his expression was cold and aloof. Are the descendants of the hegemon really that bad? He's actually scared to this extent. Everyone looked at him without blinking. No one dared to say anything else. If the ancient god Jilong himself were here, I'm afraid he wouldn't bother with you useless descendants of the Creator Realm, Su Yu said coldly. Hearing this, the 7 of them relaxed. The other party wasn't ancient god Nine-Dragon's true body? After a moment of panic, he carefully thought about it and realized that it made sense. Just what sort of world-shaking figure was ancient god Nine-Dragon's true body? Why would he come to a small upper palace? Why would he be willing to help them purify the moon water? Who are you? Yao Guang's expression didn't change. Even if he wasn't the ancient god Jilong, he was still able to trigger one of the 8 supreme being domains, so there was a high chance that he was the ancient god Jilong's successor or descendant. Su Yu drew a line on his body with his finger, and all the 8-colored light gathered at his fingertip. Who am I? Su Yu said indifferently, I am just a person who has done some research on the 8 great supremes' domains. A little research? The light-shaking realm understood, but others might not. Lulua said, Please explain your origins. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for us to let you go. Su Yu cast a glance at her and said calmly, You're the descendant of the Life Divine Master, right? He flicked his finger, and a green speck of light flew out of the 8-colored ring of light on his fingertip. The speck of light fell to the ground and immediately formed a green statue. Isn't that Lulua's immortal domain? The others were shocked. The most unique aspect of Lulua's life domain was her undying body. Once he used it, he would be able to resurrect on the spot if he died. But how could Su Yu know? Who are you? The descendant of the reincarnation master asked. Su Yu glanced at him and flicked his finger again. 6 doors of different colors entered everyone's eyes. The 6 doors rotated, faintly creating a mysterious relationship of cause and effect in the reincarnation of all things. Seeing this, everyone's expression changed again. The karma reincarnation domain of listening path. Then, Su Yu flicked all the specks of light in his hand. Every one of them clearly displayed the characteristics of the domains of the 7 people present. This caused them to fall into a state of great shock and confusion. Even the descendants of the ancient god Jilong couldn't master the domains that were unique to their bloodlines. There was a slight difference between the sovereign domain and the sovereign domain. For example, they were both domains of fate. Yao Guang's domain of fate focused on divination, while Su Yu's domain focused on changing fate. Who am I? I am just a person who has done some research on the 8 great domains, Su Yu said casually. His expression was relaxed, but on the inside he was sweating profusely. Su Yu's heart sank when the 8 great supreme being domains erupted without any warning. However, he was quick-witted and deliberately imitated the domains of the descendants of the 7 masters to get away with it. How did you do your research? Lulua was shocked. Her unique, undying domain had been learned by someone else. How could she accept it? I understood at a glance. Su Yu stared at Lulua calmly. It's just the 8 great domains. It's no big deal. Hiss. Wasn't his tone a little too arrogant? The 8 great Supreme's domains were the ultimate of all domains in the world. How could he say it was no big deal? But they couldn't refute him. This was because Su Yu had indeed displayed the unique Supreme realm that they were so proud of easily. They couldn't decide for a moment. How should they face this person next? Should they fight or make peace? They couldn't help but look at Yao Guang. Yao Guang's heart trembled. He finally believed Su Yu's words. He came from the Tao Abyss. He came from the most mysterious place in the world. Only someone from there could underestimate the supreme domain and do something as nature-defying as imitating everyone else's domains. Since you are no match for the masters, I apologize to you on behalf of the members of the Upper Palace. Yao Guang cupped his fists and bowed. Su Yu nodded. It's a small matter. Just don't be so reckless next time. The other descendants of the masters heaved a sigh of relief. If they really fought, it was hard to say whether they could suppress this mysterious person. But one person refused to let it go. Wait, there's still something we haven't confirmed, right? Lulua pursed her red lips and said stubbornly. The others felt their hearts skip a beat. Yes, their original purpose of coming here was to confirm whether Su Yu was the murderer of the dead souls. Yao Guang hesitated for a moment, then turned to Yanran and asked, Is it him? If it was, then there would be a fierce battle between them. The gazes of the other 5 also turned to Yanran. The treasures hidden in their sleeves were ready to be used again. Everyone's hearts were in their throats, extremely nervous. As she raised her beautiful eyes, her gaze fell on Su Yu. Under everyone's gaze, Yanran opened her red lips and said with certainty, It's not him. Hearing this, everyone was completely relieved. All of them heaved a sigh of relief. Yao Guang discreetly wiped his palms on his clothes. His palms were already covered in cold sweat. He didn't want to make an enemy of the unfathomable Su Yu. Fortunately, he wasn't the person Yanran pointed out. The one who killed the dead souls was someone else, not him, Yanran added. Chapter 26:17. I see. Yao Guang regained his composure, his body indescribably relaxed. He said with a smile, Elder, it was just a false alarm. Please don't take it to heart. Su Yu stared at Yanran and took a deep look at her. He then looked at Yao Guang calmly and said, The hot spring has been purified. Yao Guang's eyes flashed with anticipation as he asked, May I ask, Elder, how much was purified? There were so many impurities, and Yao Guang would be very satisfied to be able to purify 30%. Why don't you go and see for yourself? Su Yu moved away, making way for the entrance behind him. Yao Guang exchanged glances with the others, then entered the seal. Everyone's expressions changed as they looked inside. It was completely purified. Oh my God, it was 100% purified, they said in disbelief. What followed was a huge surprise. Such a clear pulse cleansing divine marrow was enough to strengthen the power of their bloodlines. Of course, they could clearly see that at least 1/10 of the pulse cleansing divine marrow was gone. But no one mentioned it. Compared to the complete purification of the moon water, the portion that was lost was negligible. Perhaps it was a necessary loss during the purification process? Yao Guang hid his surprise and returned to the outside world. He bowed deeply to Su Yu. Elder, the upper palace of the time realm will never forget your kindness. It was nothing, Su Yu said calmly. Yao Guang wanted to befriend him, so he said, I will hold a celebratory banquet. I hope you will honor me with your presence. The rest of the descendants of the rulers walked out, their minds racing. Such a mysterious expert was capable of accomplishing things that not even sovereigns were capable of. It would be foolish not to befriend him as soon as possible. Yes, Elder, We will never be able to repay your kindness. Please honor me with your presence at the celebratory banquet." Suyu declined several times before he couldn't help but say, "Fine." Thus, under Yao Guang's orders, the servants quickly began to prepare the celebratory banquet. "I will go back and rest for a while. I will come back later." The banquet was still in preparation, so Suyu had to return to the guest room. Yao Guang and the others nodded. Suyu walked back to the guest room alone, but suddenly stopped halfway. Without turning his head, he said, "Come out. We have been following you all the way." Crash! A series of rustling sounds could be heard as several fallen leaves fell from a big tree behind Suyu. An emerald green light gushed out of the leaf and condensed into a human figure, which then appeared in front of Suyu. It was Luluwa. Her pretty face was filled with coldness, and her bright eyes were staring straight at Suyu. One could see traces of stubbornness in his expression. "It's you. What's the matter?" Suyu asked calmly. Luluwa enunciated each word clearly. "You're the murderer." Suyu asked calmly. "Your companions should have already confirmed that I'm not the murderer. So why do you have to frame me?" However, Luluwa was certain. Dead Soul has mastered the Dead Soul domain. He can't be killed by any means. In the entire Upper Palace, apart from Dead Soul himself, Luluwa was the nemesis of the Death domain. In the entire Upper Palace, there are only 3 people who can kill him. One is Brother Yao Guang, one is me, and the last one is you. It can't be me or Brother Yao Guang. It can only be you. Suyu's expression was calm, and there was no emotion on his face. He looked at Luluwa and shook his head slightly. "You know nothing about the 8 great domains. The life domain and the destiny domain aren't the only things that can kill someone with the death domain," Suyu said. Luluwa's eyes were still wide open, as if telling Suyu with her eyes that she didn't believe him. "Watch closely." Suyu waved his hand, and the Dead Soul materialized. Seeing the lifelike Dead Soul, Luluwa hurriedly retreated in fear. Dead Soul? No, not Dead Soul. She was the master of the life domain, and she could clearly sense the Dead Soul in front of her, whether it was real or fake. Suyu flicked his finger, and the time domain appeared. The time domain rapidly retreated, and the Dead Soul was wiped out from the world. Then came the space domain, which broke down the Dead Soul into the most primitive space particles in the world. Then came the soul domain. The 8 great domains were at Suyu's fingertips, and each domain had the ability to kill souls. Luluwa was dumbfounded. She had thought that only the life domain could restrain the death domain and kill the master of the death domain. But in the end, any one of them was possible. "This," Suyu said calmly, "do you understand now? Anyone in the Upper Palace could kill a dead soul." Luluwa's face turned red, just as Suyu had said. She knew nothing about the 8 great supreme domains. Luluwa knew that she had wrongly accused someone, and she couldn't bring herself to do it. She turned her head away and said in a voice as soft as a mosquito, "I'm sorry." Suyu smiled indifferently. "I don't blame you. You were just thinking of your companion." Luluwa stole a glance at Suyu. "Won't you be angry? Won't you tell Brother Yao Guang?" She was afraid that Yao Guang would punish her for this. Yao Guang really respected Suyu. "No," Suyu said. "You had good intentions." Hearing that, Luluwa felt relieved. When she looked at Suyu again, she couldn't help but feel that he was much more pleasing to the eye. "Thank you," Luluwa said awkwardly, twisting her fingers together. Suyu said, "I have studied your life domain, and I feel that there is room for improvement. Try to digest these insights." He tapped his index finger, and a shred of insight entered Luluwa's mind. Luluwa digested it on the spot. The more she felt, the more she realized how extraordinary the insight was. This is the insight of a middle-level life domain," Luluwa said happily. Her life domain had remained at a low level, and it was difficult for it to improve. Luluwa was pleasantly surprised when she felt the massive amount of information in the insight. She could not suppress the joy on her face. She said gratefully, "Thank you, Elder. Thank you for your guidance. Emgo, your companions might be looking for you. Don't let them find out that you followed me," Suyu said. Lulua was moved. What a generous and benevolent elder. Not only was he not angry that she had doubted him, he had even given her insight and covered it up for her. Lulua was ashamed as she recalled her actions. "Elder, I am really sorry. If you need my help in the future, please let me know," Lulua said with a red face. Her good impression of Suyu instantly reached its peak. "Haha, it's fine." Lulua thanked him again before picking up her skirt and jogging back. Suyu watched her leave, the smile on his face fading. "I had asked you to come out, but I did not expect that little girl to come out," Suyu said calmly to the air. Splash! The water in front of him rippled, and a beautiful, enchanting woman walked out. She was Yanran. Slap. Chapter 26:18. Suyu said calmly, "It's better than your hypocrisy, isn't it?" His words seemed to have a deeper meaning. Outsiders could not understand. Only Yanran knew. She said with a smile, "If I were honest, you would probably be in trouble now, right?" She had seen Suyu and Huangfu Yi kill the dead soul, but she had lied to her companions and betrayed them. That was why Suyu said she was hypocritical. "Tell me, what do you want from me?" Suyu said calmly, activating the silence in his sleeves. Yenran's smile grew wider. "Elder, is this how you treat those who have helped you?" She sensed that Suyu was about to attack. She pointed at the air, and the space rippled like water. With just a thought, she could easily leave. Her space domain was not low, already at the middle level. It would be difficult for Suyu to keep her here like he had killed the dead soul. "Fine, give me a reason not to kill you," Suyu said calmly. Yanran smiled. "The answer is simple. I hope you can help me. I didn't point you out just now. Consider it a greeting gift." Suyu looked at her. "The fight for the space master hasn't started, right?" Yanran shook her head. "Not for me, but for Baiming City's Xiaohao." "For him?" Suyu's eyes were filled with a cold light. "Who are you to him?" Suyu pretended not to know. Yanran smiled. "I am his partner, just like how the Soul Master's descendant is helping the waning Moon Empress. We all have descendants who support us." Suyu could imagine the exchange of benefits. Once the descendant they supported successfully became a master, they would also help the descendant become the master of the domain the descendant belonged to. Suyu shook his head. "My abilities are limited. I cannot help Xiaohao." He and Xiaohao had a life and death feud. There was no way he could help Xiaohao. "Elder, you don't have to be humble. I have seen your abilities." Yanran was confident in his ability to purify the moon water. Suyu muttered to himself irresolutely for some time. "Due to certain reasons, I cannot directly participate in the fight between the descendants of the masters." Yanran's eyes lit up, and she said, "Senior doesn't need to show yourself, and Xiaohao doesn't even need to know of your existence." Suyu's face was filled with melancholy, and after a long while he said, "If you can give me enough things, I can consider it." Yanran was overjoyed. If Suyu didn't want anything in return and just wanted to help her, she would have second thoughts. "What does Senior want?" Yanran asked. Suyu pointed at Yanran's sleeves and said, "I want a magical treasure that can accelerate time." He had the intention to reconstruct the evil traversing Lotus Eat, but the books he needed to comprehend were as many as the hairs on a cow. His own time acceleration domain was far from enough for him to understand the entire book in a short period of time. But Yanran was different. If he could get Xiaohao's time treasure, he might have a chance. "What level?" Yanran asked. Suyu thought for a moment, then said, "Time acceleration of 10,000 times." 10,000? Sweetly Ran clicked her tongue. Only Xiaohao's protective magic treasure, which the chief sovereign of time personally bestowed upon him, can accelerate time at this level. But he can't hand it over to others. Now that the hegemonic lord's descendants were about to fight for the throne, any defensive treasure of the Heaven Dao lord level would be extremely valuable. How could Xiaohao give it to others? This is the only thing I want. If he can't give it to me, then forget about it, Suyu said decisively. Yanran looked troubled and said hesitantly, How about this? Senior, don't make a decision just yet. Let me find a chance to ask Xiaohao. Suyu nodded. Sure. Yanran heaved a sigh of relief and said, All right. Senior, you may leave now. If you need any help during the banquet later, Yanran will do her best. A place to cooperate? Suyu looked around and returned to the guest room. Standing at the door of the guest room, Suyu glanced at the ground beneath his feet. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt as if there was an eye spying on everything on the ground. He pushed open the door and entered. Huangfu Yi was secretly practicing the death domain in the guest room. Every time she practiced, she had to release the heavenly law death eye in her left eye. Stop practicing, Suyu said. Huangfu Yi didn't understand and immediately withdrew the heavenly law death eye. Suyu closed his eyes and sensed his surroundings. After a while, his expression turned serious. The feeling of being watched had disappeared. Staring at Huangfu Yi's heavenly law death eye, Suyu pondered. Could it be that Huangfu Yi's heavenly law death eye had attracted an unknown being to spy on him? Try not to use the heavenly law death eye in the future, Suyu warned. Huangfu Yi scratched her head in confusion. Okay. Not long after, the banquet began. The 7 descendants of the rulers gathered together and drank with Suyu. They chatted harmoniously with one another. Among them, Liluo was the most eager to talk to Suyu. Her face was slightly red, and she expressed her goodwill to Suyu. Her attitude was completely different from before. Her actions attracted the attention of the descendants of the rulers. What had happened? Senior, what do you plan to do next? Yanran asked meaningfully. Why don't you stay in the upper palace? We will do our best to satisfy your needs. Yao Guang agreed. That's right, Senior. If you need anything, just call us. How could he have forgotten? The pulse-cleansing divine marrow had been purified, and Suyu could leave at any time. It was only then that Suyu understood that this was what Yanran meant by cooperation. Yes, I did come to the sacred city to do something, Suyu said. I need to wait for half a year for a special day. Yao Guang's heart skipped a beat, and he said, Could it be that Senior is waiting for the 9 moons' alignment? Half a year later, it would be the day when the 9 moons would appear. Yes. Suyu did not hide anything. Yao Guang's expression became serious. Could it be that Senior has also heard the news? Suyu's eyes flickered. Tell me about it. Al-Qaid and the other sovereign descendants glanced at each other with serious expressions. Yesterday, we received news from the god's palace that one of the 4 protectors of ancient god Ninethether, the Saint Demon, appeared for a brief period of time. The god suspects that he will come out and cause trouble when the 9 moons align. In the time domain that covered the entire time domain would only lose its effect when the 9 moons aligned. At that time, it might be the best time for the holy demon to appear without being discovered. Suyu was shocked. That day, when he cultivated with the Yin Devil Chi, he accidentally drew out the remnant soul of the holy devil. The time sovereign had sensed such a brief and weak change. As he thought about it, he could not help but be secretly shocked. The terror of the rulers was far beyond imagination. Chapter 26:19. The Juggernaut has already found out where the holy demon might be hiding and is currently assembling a group of experts. When the 9 moons align, the holy demon's hiding place will appear, and we'll charge in. We also plan to go there. Yao Guang looked at Suyu. Elder, do you want to check it out? That's one of the protectors of the ancient god Ninethether. He's been hiding in the holy city for many years. Who knows how many ancient treasures he's left behind? Suyu had originally wanted to find an excuse to sneak in with them. The light-shaking realm, on the other hand, gave him a way out. Fine, I'll follow you to see what's going on, Suyu said. Yao Guang and the others were overjoyed. With an expert like Senior following them, this trip would naturally be much safer. The banquet ended in an exceptionally pleasant manner. However, in a certain courtyard, there was a gloomy expression. Mother, are we moving again? We just moved in. Su Kai followed Qin Xianer and Luo Shui, hurriedly leaving the house they had rented 3 days ago. Qin Xianer's face was filled with worry and helplessness. She said, "There is already an unknown person in front of our house. If we don't leave now, it will be too late." Luo Shui's brows were knitted together in worry. She was the one who discovered the unknown person last night. Unlike in the past, Luo Shui noticed that the interval between them being discovered was becoming shorter and shorter. She was worried that the enemy had already locked onto their approximate trajectory. It was only a matter of time before they were found. "Mother, why don't we ask Uncle Su for help?" Su Kai suddenly thought of Suyu, the kind-hearted human Uncle Su. Hearing this, Qin Xianer said, "Kai, don't mention Uncle Su anymore. Our enemies are the subordinates of the Time Sovereign. No one can help us." Moreover, she did not trust this so-called Uncle Su at all. He even suspected that Uncle Su might be a subordinate of the Time Ruler. Otherwise, how could they have been discovered in just 3 days? Uncle Su is different. He is very powerful. Su Kai argued. The image of Su Yu casually killing the gang members was deeply imprinted in Su Kai's mind. "Sure, don't speak." Suddenly, Luo Shui stopped moving and gestured for him to keep quiet. That was because she had discovered something unusual. Qin Xianer also felt it, and her expression changed greatly. "There are unknown experts searching nearby," Qin Xianer said. Just now, there was a gaze that swept past them, vaguely sweeping past them. Luo Shui's face darkened. "You guys go first. I'll stay." They had been discovered. There was no need to rely on luck. Only when one person stayed behind to attract attention could the others find a chance to escape successfully. "Shui!" Qin Xianer couldn't bear it anymore. He did not know how strong the enemy was, but he could imagine that it must be very powerful. Once she stayed, it was hard to say whether she would live or die. "Let's go quickly. At least let Su Yu see his daughter." Luo Shui sighed. That was all she could do. Qin Xianer was moved. She felt that perhaps Su Yu owed Luo Shui a favor that he could never repay. "Be careful." Qin Xianer bit her red lips as she endured the pain and left with Su Kai. Luo Shui stayed where he was. Not long after, a terrifying aura and rapid speed arrived in the blink of an eye. It was Void Nirvana Realm Master Xian Dao, dressed in the uniform of the Palace of Sovereigns. Just now, his gaze swept across this place. "Only you." Master Xian Dao had 3 eyes, and he asked in unison. Luo Shui did not say a word. She performed the wizard technique with trembling hands. "How many years has it been? You have never given up. Today we will perish together." Sky-splitting Cosmo style. The sky-splitting Cosmo style was a top-secret legacy that was far superior to the sky-splitting Yin-Yang style. It was a legacy divine technique left behind by the wizard ancestor in the 9 Dragons' ancient god realm. Unfortunately, Luo Shui's strength was still too low, and she could not fully display the power of this technique. Insignificant skill. In front of the void Nirvana realm, Luo Shui was vulnerable. The latter casually flicked his finger and sent Luo Shui flying. Without waiting for her to stabilize herself, Master Xian Dao took a step forward and pressed her to the ground with an extremely powerful, mysterious path power. Puff! Under the tremendous force, Luo Shui vomited blood. The bright red blood stained her white robe. Master Xian Dao looked at Luo Shui for a moment, then shook his head slightly. "It's not you. Tell me, where is the child?" For more than 10 years, the Time Master had been paying attention to the strange phenomenon of the nine-colored radiance. He had also sent a group of guards to capture as many people as they could. After more than 10 years of investigation, the guards were able to confirm that the nine-colored radiance was related to a human girl. However, that girl and her two relatives were extremely cunning. Every time they were about to find them, the latter would immediately leave that area. Even after hiding in the Holy City for more than 10 years, they were still unable to find them. This time they increased their search power and finally narrowed the area they were hiding in to a small area. Now, as expected, they made a huge discovery. Luo Shui gritted her teeth and didn't say a word. You think you'll be fine if you don't say anything? Naive. In front of the void Nirvana realm master Xiandao, there was no difference whether she spoke or not. He pointed at Luo Shui's head and began to search her soul. Luo Shui twitched in pain as the memories in her mind were coldly searched. A moment later, the void Nirvana realm master Xiandao revealed a look of joy. It really is that human girl. Take her to the prison of the Palace of Rulers. The void Nirvana realm master Xiandao quickly chased after Qin Xianer and Su Kai'er. Qin Xianer seemed to sense something. She faintly felt that something was wrong. Coming to a corner, Qin Xianer put Su Kai'er down and said, Kai'er, run alone and don't look back. Do you understand? A lifelike black phoenix naturally appeared on Qin Xianer's chest. Mother, I don't want to leave. Su Kai'er seemed to have a premonition of what was going to happen next and was extremely unwilling. Qin Xianer squatted down and stroked her head lovingly. Kai'er, listen to me. If you run far away on your own for Mother's sake, then Mother can still fight with the other party. Do you understand? Su Kai'er bit her lip tightly. Her abilities were too weak and she would only be a hindrance by her mother's side. Kai'er, if one day you can find your father, tell him that I have never regretted it. Tears fell from Qin Xianer's eyes. What did she not regret? She did not regret giving birth to a child for Suyu, even if it was because of this child that she was about to be killed. She did not regret anything in all of this. As long as it was for Suyu, she would not regret it even if she was in a sea of bitterness. Su Kai'er's tears fell like rain as she felt an eternal farewell. At this moment, she hoped that someone could save her mother and their pitiful family. Suddenly, Su Kai'er seemed to have thought of something and said, Mother, hold on! After saying this, she ran away alone and hid in the dark to retrieve the jade pendant. This was what Suyu had left for her. Chapter 26:20. She believed that Suyu would definitely come. There was no reason for that kind of trust. It was as if she was born with it. Uncle Su, please save my mother. Su Kai'er's voice was choked with sobs as she crushed the communication jade slip. Crack! The jade was broken. A silent wave quickly swept out, carrying Su Kai'er's only hope and her voice. It penetrated through space and reached an unknown place. She prayed in her heart, praying that Uncle Su would come immediately. She had to save her mother. As long as she could save her mother, even if she was captured or killed, she would have no regrets. Her mother had been working too hard all these years. She did not want to see her mother get hurt again. Under her gaze, the weak wave faded into the distance. She believed that once the message arrived, the kind Uncle Su would immediately appear. Puff! However, what made Su Kai'er's body stiffen and her eyes widen was without any warning. A palm with aged skin and bulging veins stretched out from it. In a casual manner, he caught the wave that was about to leave into the distance in his palm. An old man with a gloomy smile slowly appeared. Hee, do you still want to ask for help? The old man laughed hoarsely. His laughter was filled with the joy of a hunter who had forced his prey into a corner. 10 years. 10 years of relentless pursuit had finally come to an end. No. Su Kai'er or murmured in her heart, clinging to the last shred of hope. She hoped that the old man would be confused and let go of the message. Although she knew it was impossible, when people were in despair, they would often have unrealistic illusions. Su-kai was no exception. Looking at the message in his palm, the old man grinned. To ask for help at a time of danger. This person must be very important to you. He should be with you, right? His palm slowly loosened, and the message reverberated once more. Should I lure the snake out of its hole and lure him here? The void nirvana old man sneered. Su-kai-er's heart thumped wildly. Her eyes widened as she stared at the old man's palm without blinking. Let go. Let go. You must let go. She prayed crazily in her heart, like a drowning person seeing a straw floating on the water. That was her last shred of hope. Don't extinguish it. However, the old man suddenly clenched his hand, and the transmission talisman returned to his palm. He clenched his fists tightly. With a poof, the transmission was completely annihilated. They turned into sparkling and translucent spots of light that scattered in all directions. I'm just kidding. Why would I do something superfluous? The old man laughed mockingly. His target was the little girl. If other people were to be drawn here, what if there was a mishap? The last trace of flame in Su-kai-er's heart suddenly extinguished, and she slumped to the ground, her mind completely blank. It's over. It was really over. No one could save them now. Kai-er, hurry up and leave. Qin Xian'er's expression was cold, and a murderous aura, which had been hidden for a long time, surrounded her body. It was the murderous aura she had cultivated when she was still in the Shura civilization. However, it had been a long time since he had used it. The little black phoenix on her shoulder seemed to have sensed Qin Xian'er's state of mind and cried out continuously, "Little girl, be obedient and come with me. You won't be able to escape." The old man waved his hand, and all the Xian energy in the world suddenly gathered. It condensed into a giant palm that was 1,000 feet wide in the sky and grabbed toward where Su-kai was. Yellow Spring's phoenix song. Qin Xian'er pounced over, and the phoenix on her shoulder immediately let out a sharp cry. The cry pierced through the world and instantly destroyed the palm formed by Xian energy. The remaining sharp cry flew into the sky and landed on the old man's body. However, how could Master Xian Dao, who was at the void nirvana realm, be attacked by the black phoenix? It wasn't even able to break through his Xian energy armor. It only left behind a faint ripple before the sound wave attack shattered it. The old man looked deeply at the little black phoenix, as if he had seen it somewhere before. However, he couldn't remember where. "I'll deal with you later." The space around the old man fluctuated. This was because his movement technique was extremely fast, allowing him to break through the barrier of space. He had already arrived before Su-kai-er. Qin Xian'er's eyes almost popped out of their sockets as she screamed crazily, "Don't touch her!" Boom! The black phoenix suddenly exploded and turned into a giant ball of black flames that attached itself to Qin Xian'er's body. From afar, Qin Xian'er looked like she was covered in hellfire and had walked out from the endless netherworld. As the black flames spread out, her graceful figure became hazy and faintly discernible. Only her eyes were filled with anger and endless coldness. Whoosh! In the next instant, the flames became even more intense. Qin Xian'er, who was originally far away, appeared in front of Su-kai-er at an astonishing speed and blocked the old man. A part of the surging black flames separated and turned into an incomparably black halberd. Chi! The halberd instantly stabbed out and collided with the old man's palm. With a whoosh, the halberd and spear suffered a fierce attack and returned to their original form, turning into a ball of black flames. The old man's palm was slightly pierced. Hiss! The old man withdrew his hand in pain and looked at Qin Xian'er with a hint of shock. After looking for a while, the old man seemed to remember something, and his expression changed. A heaven-shaking ecstasy appeared on his face, causing the muscles on his face to tremble. 9 Darkness, Divine Flame. That phoenix is the sacred artifact of ancient god 9 Darkness, the 9 Darkness Divine Flame. The old man couldn't help but shout. He found it strange that the small black phoenix was so familiar. It turned out that he had once accidentally seen some information on ancient god 9 Darkness. It was said that the sacred artifact of ancient god 9 Darkness was a divine flame that appeared when the world was created. This flame could incinerate everything in the world. Even the stone fetus son of heaven could be burned to death when facing this flame. It could be said that the 9 Darkness divine flame was the number 1 divine flame in the world. It was just that he hadn't been able to recognize its phoenix form. Now that he saw the black phoenix turn into black flames, he finally remembered. His gaze moved from Su Kai to Qin Xianer, and he was so excited that he couldn't control himself. Ancient god 9 Darkness's successor, or perhaps an ancient god's descendant. The heavens are helping me. The heavens are helping me. It had to be known that the time god was willing to pay any price to protect ancient god 9 Darkness. What more a successor or descendant of ancient god 9 Darkness? If he could bring her back, the reward he would receive would be unimaginable. The time god might even bestow him with endless time acceleration, allowing him to break into the Nirvana Void Realm, or even break into the Tao Lord Realm. The old man was wild with joy when he thought of this. I'm going to take both you mother and daughter with me. The old man laughed wildly as he reached out with his palms, each one aimed at a person. Qin Xianer's expression was extremely gloomy. She was abnormally unfamiliar with the use of ancient god treasures, so she couldn't bring out the power a treasure should have. 9 Darkness Sky Seal. Qin Xianer clenched her teeth and forcefully activated a divine art that she wasn't familiar with. Chapter 26-21. There were hundreds of heavenly book characters carved on the runes. Whoosh! The runes pressed forward, and the 2 palm prints that the old man had conjured were crushed on the spot. The runes did not slow down and headed straight for the old man. The old man felt a chill in his heart as he sensed the danger contained in the runes. He hurriedly displayed his domain. You're just a yellow path master. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Lightning flashed and thunder roared in his domain. Countless bolts of lightning fell like a violent storm, bombarding the runes that were sweeping over. But the runes were very strong. They ignored the domain and pressed forward, hitting the old man. When they touched the old man's body, he let out a miserable cry. His path master body was emitting waves of white eyes. It was like raw meat being roasted on charcoal. The runes took this opportunity to wrap around the old man, and with an extremely sharp momentum, they inflicted serious damage on him. The old man finally panicked and used all his strength to struggle. But it was to no avail. The runes did not move at all, as if they would not stop until the old man was burnt to ashes. Screams reverberated across the universe. The old man's body was charred, and even his soul was burnt. He was about to be killed. However, the runes suddenly flickered and then quickly dimmed. Qin Xianer could not control the ancient god artifact. It was not easy for her to control it for so long. The old man took the chance and roared, forcefully shaking the runes away. The runes creaked and finally shattered. The old man let out a long breath. His eyes were still filled with fear. After all, he was the heir or descendant of the ancient god, and he took my ancient god artifact. It was too terrifying. He had been too careless. He looked up and stared at Qin Xianer, whose face was pale and body was trembling. His eyes were cold. Qin Xianer had forcefully used the runes just now, and it had also caused great damage to her. Luckily, your foundation is not stable. Otherwise, you would have failed miserably today. The old man's eyes were cold, and he still had some lingering fear. He really had to be glad that Qin Xianer's foundation was too weak. Otherwise, thinking to this point, the old man's face was filled with viciousness. He raised his hand and threw a flying knife. It was a Tao artifact that he had personally refined. It was more than enough to kill Yellow Path Master, who, the divine fire of the 9 underworlds, automatically protected him, condensing into an armor around his body to block the flying dagger. However, this attack was the full power of a void nirvana cultivator. It was not something that Qin Xiener could easily defend against. With a puff, the 9 serenities' divine flame was penetrated. The Tao artifact flying dagger, with an incomparably sharp glow, pierced through everything and pierced into the 9 serenities' divine flame's chest. With a soft groan, Qin Xiener was sent flying. His lungs were injured, and he couldn't help but spurt out a mouthful of blood. Sparkling and translucent blood-colored pearls floated in the air, reflecting Su Kai, Er's despairing and crying face. "Mother!" Su Kai screamed and rushed over. Upper Palace. The group of rulers happily toasted Suyu. Suyu smiled and responded to them one by one. Suddenly, when he raised his wine cup, his palms suddenly trembled for no reason. Inadvertently, a trace of power leaked out, causing cracks to appear on the wine cup. The descendants of the hegemons stared blankly for a moment, but they didn't mind. Yao Guang smiled and said, "Someone, get me another good wine cup." "Hold on," Suyu said slowly. He stared at the broken wine cup in his palm, deep in thought. Why would his palm tremble for no reason? Moreover, the crisscrossing cracks on the wine cup had strangely formed the word save. Suyu thought he had seen wrongly, but upon closer inspection, the cracks had indeed formed the word save. What happened? Suyu put down the wine cup. His palm brushed over the top of the wine cup, imperceptibly displaying the fate realm, peeking into the changes of fate in this world that were closely related to him. However, the wine in the cup was like a mirror, reflecting many scenes. All of a sudden, the image flashed and a crying girl appeared. The image was fixed at the moment when the girl was begging Suyu for help. The shape of her mouth was the word save. It was exactly the same as the cracks on the wine cup. Suyu was shocked. She didn't use the communication jade charm, but she could transmit her thoughts to me? Is this girl proficient in the fate realm? Only the fate realm could transmit thoughts from such a long distance. Just like before the great battle with the sinful lady, Xia Jingyu used fate to transmit a message to Suyu. "Senior, what's going on? Do you need our help?" Yao Guang saw that Suyu's expression was not right and asked hurriedly. Suyu shook his head and put down the wine cup. The shadow of the knife dissipated in an instant. "You guys continue eating. I'll come back after I kill someone," Suyu said lightly. He wondered if it was because he hadn't completely wiped out the gang back then, so the little girl had been targeted by those forces again. The rulers looked at each other in dismay. Why did Suyu suddenly want to kill someone while he was having a good meal? However, the person he wanted to kill couldn't be a small fry, could he? As they thought of this, the rulers were filled with awe. Suyu was indeed a senior. He could kill a strong man with such ease. When he finished speaking, Suyu closed his eyes, and the endless lines of fate circled in his mind. Among them, the lines of fate concerning the little girl quickly appeared. Following the lines of fate, Suyu locked onto her position. When he opened his eyes, the space realm around him was activated. In the blink of an eye, the world was spinning. He arrived at a desolate place. Before he could get a clear view of his surroundings, he heard a sorrowful cry. Suyu glanced sideways and saw that it was indeed a little girl. An old man of the void nirvana realm was reaching out with his giant palm, ready to capture the little girl alive. However, Suyu's arrival shocked the old man, and he looked back in horror. He clearly sensed a powerful space realm. "The Time Master is handling a matter. Please leave the Upper Palace," the old man said calmly. The Upper Palace had no conflict of interest with the Time Master, and they even had to rely on the Time Master. Suyu had put on his bamboo hat again. Under the cover, his eyes were calm and emotionless. "I have a good impression of that little girl. You didn't ask me for my permission to hurt her, did you?" Su said lightly. The old man was on guard and said coldly, "This is something that the Time Master personally instructed me to do. Your Excellency, you really shouldn't meddle in other people's business." Why did it sound like he was up to no good from his tone? "I really am going to meddle in this." Su raised his hand, and the fiery red jade seal appeared in his palm. With the activation of 10 million time crystals, the fiery red jade seal was immediately activated. The old man was so frightened that his eyebrows twitched wildly. As he fled into the distance, he shouted, "Are you crazy?" Su was too lazy to talk nonsense, and he threw the jade seal directly. With a flash of fire, the old man was incinerated on the spot, and not even ashes were left. If the other party was a member of the faction, Su would not have used such a fierce method. But who asked him to be the Time Master? If he dilly-dallied and escaped, it would not be good to alert the Time Master. Ah, Uncle Su. Su Kai only came back to her senses after a while. Because the time between Suyu's appearance and killing the old man was too short, she did not understand what had happened. "It's all right, I'm leaving." Suyu turned around calmly and was about to activate the space realm to return. Chapter 26-22. Suyu furrowed his brows slightly. He had come to rescue Su Kai, which was already very kind. Why was she still not satisfied? However, looking at the crying Su Kai, Suyu had a strange feeling that he couldn't refuse. "Fine, I'll help her to the end," Suyu sighed. He didn't understand why he was so kind. In the past, he wouldn't have come here to kill a girl he didn't know. He wouldn't have agreed to her endless demands. Suyu walked over with his hands clasped behind his back and looked at the girl in Su Kai's arms. The girl's body was covered by the black divine fire of the 9 serenities. He couldn't see her face or sense her breath. He could only vaguely see her extremely thin body. She was so thin and delicate that it made people feel sorry for her. On his chest, there was a clear and huge wound. Traces of blood kept flowing out from it. When it came into contact with the black divine fire of the 9 serenities, it was immediately burned into bursts of pungent smoke. Fortunately, the injury isn't serious, Suyu roughly judged after a glance. Su Kai whimpered. "But why did Mother fall into a coma?" "That's because she used some secret technique that overloaded her body. Her body was overdrawn, and she was attacked by the Void Nirvana Pathmaster, so she naturally fell into a coma." As he spoke, Suyu walked over and squatted in front of the girl. His palms slowly moved forward, and from a distance of 3 feet, a stream of pure life force entered the girl's wound. The serious wound began to heal immediately. The bleeding stopped slowly. At the same time, because of the infusion of life force, the girl gradually woke up. She slowly opened her eyes. Su Kai was crying, and her face was overflowing with a joyful smile. Shifting his gaze again, he saw an expert 3 feet away, and the mysterious bamboo hat man was right in front of him. Her heart skipped a beat, and she was startled. Mistaking it for a guard of the Time Master, she subconsciously attacked. A divine fire of the 9 serenities gushed out from a close distance. Fortunately, Suyu was always on guard, even when he was saving people. Without any hesitation, Zhang Xian unleashed a time domain. Freeze! The divine fire of the 9 serenities was extremely powerful. In just a moment, it burned through the time realm and sprayed out again. Seizing the opportunity, Suyu calmly retreated, keeping a safe distance. He was a little displeased. "Your Excellency, I didn't come all the way here to save you, and I don't expect any thanks, but you don't have to treat me like this, do you?" Suyu asked calmly. Due to his status, he had purposely lowered his voice. Those who were familiar with him would not be able to recognize him. Qin Xianer stood up slowly and looked at Suyu. The hostility in her eyes didn't weaken, but became even stronger. "Mother, what are you doing?" "This is Uncle Su. He saved Mother." Su Kai couldn't help but complain when she saw the two of them suddenly drawing their swords. How could Mom treat Uncle Su like this? Kaya, get back. Chin Sienner looked at Suyu coldly and said, Mother taught you that people's hearts are unfathomable and that you shouldn't trust people so easily. Now it really came true. What did it come true? Su Kai, or felt that her mother was being unreasonable. It was clearly Uncle Su who saved her mother. How could he say such things? Speak. Which descendant of the Time Chief Sovereign are you? Chin Sienner said coldly, gathering the 9 serenities' divine fire around her with great difficulty. Suyu replied calmly, I'm not a descendant of the Time Master. Chin Sienner snorted and said, Don't quibble. My husband has experienced many of your tricks, and he has already seen through them. She mistakenly thought that Suyu was proficient in the domain of time, so he must be a descendant of the Time Chief Sovereign. She had long been suspicious of the Uncle Su mentioned by Su Kai. What kind of person would be so nice to Su Kai for no reason? Not only did he give her the time crystal, but he also helped her solve the gang's pursuit. Now that she saw it clearly, her heart was like a mirror. He must be putting on a show. The Time Chief first sent evil men to kill them and their mother. Then Uncle Su jumped out and saved them in a time of crisis. In this way, Uncle Su could win their favor and carry out the next step of the plan. When Suyu was still alive, he had experienced many plots and plots in the world. Chin Sienner had been by his side, and she had been influenced by him, so she was far more vigilant against all kinds of plots and plots than others. Suyu was a little angry. This woman was she being overly cautious, or was she being unreasonable? You can think whatever you want, Suyu said indifferently. Then he looked at Su Kai and said, Our fate has come to an end. Take care of yourself in the future. Su Kai immediately broke free from Chin Sienner. She didn't know why she didn't want Suyu to misunderstand her. She hurriedly ran over and said, Uncle Su, I'm sorry. My mother didn't mean it. Please don't be angry. Kaya, come back. Chin Sienner said angrily, How could this child be so stupid? She had already made it very clear that this was the enemy's trick. She took a step forward and grabbed Su Kai, who was approaching Suyu. At the same time, she summoned a wisp of the divine fire of the 9 Nether in an attempt to force Suyu back. Suyu laughed angrily. He wasn't a clay bodhisattva. It was bad enough that he was attacked by this woman once, but she was going to attack him again. You woman. Suyu waved his hand casually, and a wave of the void Nirvana realm's mysterious energy turned into a hurricane. Although Su Kai's divine fire of the 9 Nether was ferocious, it had already been consumed when she fought the old man. There was only a faint wisp left. How could it withstand Suyu's mysterious energy? The divine fire of the 9 Nether, as well as the divine fire of the 9 Nether attached to Chin Sienner's body, were all swept away in an instant. It was only when they were far away that they managed to reform into a black phoenix. The little black phoenix chirped angrily, as if it was complaining about Suyu. Seeing the little black phoenix, Suyu's pupils shrank. Wasn't that little black phoenix the ancient god of the 9 Nether's treasure? As if he had thought of something, his heart skipped a beat. Then his eyes shot toward the woman like lightning. The divine fire of the 9 Nether on the surface of her body was swept away, revealing her true appearance. When his eyes fixed on that cold, beautiful face, Suyu felt as if he had been bombarded by thousands of lightning bolts, and his whole body trembled violently. He stood there, staring unblinkingly at the beautiful face that was like a wild fox fairy. Her face was still the same, just like when Suyu had seen her many years ago in a small mountain on Shinua Island. However, compared to that time had taken away the childishness on her face, leaving behind a mature charm. It had taken away the naivety, leaving behind the vicissitudes of life and persistence. At this moment, Suyu felt as if his soul was trembling uncontrollably. Her lips were trembling incessantly. The person she had been thinking about day and night was right in front of her, but she just couldn't call out his name. It was as if she was afraid that if she called out, the figure would disappear like a dream. Qin Xianer felt the strange gaze from under the bamboo hat, and she felt disgusted. She knew that it was her astonishing beauty that had attracted the attention of the other party. "Kaya, let's go." Qin Xianer grabbed Su Kai and prepared to escape. Chapter 26-23. His figure flashed like lightning, instantly appearing in front of Qin Xianer. Qin Xianer was shocked, and without thinking, she struck him with her palm. But how fast was Su Yu's reaction? He gently grasped her wrist with one hand. His other hand wrapped around Qin Xianer's slender waist. Then he pulled her into his embrace. Qin Xianer was shocked and furious by his sudden action, and she angrily rebuked, "Shameless!" She struggled with all her strength, her eyes filled with disgust and anger. Her body belonged to Su Yu alone, and no one else was allowed to touch it. But to Qin Xianer's surprise, Su Yu took off his bamboo hat. Before Qin Xianer could see his face clearly, he leaned over and kissed her red lips deeply. His strength was immense. It was as if he wanted to melt her. He hugged her deeply and kissed her forcefully, as if he wanted the two of them to become one. Qin Xianer's mind buzzed with anger. A great grief and indignation burned in her heart like a raging fire. She had been kissed by someone other than Su Yu. Amidst her boundless anger, something in Qin Xianer's body seemed to have been activated. The divine fire of the 9 serenities, which had already dissipated, gushed out from her blood. The tyrannical divine fire immediately bounced Su Yu away. Qin Xianer's eyes were filled with murderous intent, as well as a hint of madness. "I'll kill you." However, when she looked up and saw his face clearly, Qin Xianer was stunned. Her hysterical, murderous shout was still reverberating in the air, but she was standing there motionless. All the anger in her beautiful eyes had dissipated, replaced by endless shock. She looked at the person in front of her without blinking. Silver hair, a handsome face, a pair of eyes that couldn't be more familiar, and a smile that she had dreamed of countless times. If that wasn't her husband, Su Yu, who else could it be? "Brother Yu," Qin Xianer said in disbelief. It had been decades since they last met, and she had never thought that she would one day meet Su Yu in such a way. Everything had happened so suddenly, so happily, that she didn't know what to do. Su Yu shook off the burnt clothes on his chest and walked forward with a smile on his face. Without saying a word, he pulled Qin Xianer into his embrace and kissed her deeply. It was extremely forceful, as if it wanted to glue the two of them together. Qin Xianer was so happy that she started crying. She extended her snow-white arms and hooked them around Su Yu's neck, then took the initiative to give him a deep kiss. They forgot about the sky, the earth, and time and space. In their eyes, in their hearts, there was only each other in front of them, until their forgotten daughter opened her eyes wide and murmured in disbelief, "Uncle Su, Mom!" There was an indescribable feeling in her heart. There was gratitude toward Su Yu, anger toward Su Yu, and even more anger toward his mother. It was only then that Su Yu and Qin Xianer came back to their senses. As her lips parted, Qin Xianer's face flushed red. However, the two of them were still unable to separate their eyes. They continued to look deeply into each other's eyes. "Mother, how could you do this? How can you face your father?" Su Kai's eyes were filled with indescribable anger. She felt that it was incomprehensible. How could his mother, who was as pure as ice and as pure as jade, be so shameless? She actually took the initiative to do such a thing with someone other than her father. Qin Xianer's face turned red. Just as she was about to explain, Su Kai glared at Su Yu and said, "Uncle Su, although you saved my mother and my life, please don't touch my mother." She was extremely disappointed and sad. Why has my mother become such a person? It shouldn't have happened. My mother has missed my father for so many years, and she has never complained. So, why has she become so unbearable after meeting Uncle Su? Su Yu was startled, and he looked at Su Kai. After a long while, he asked in disbelief, Siener, is she our child? Qin Siener suddenly burst into tears. She was happy, sad, and relieved. She nodded and said, yes, she is Kai. Su Kai is our child. She had persisted for so many years because she wanted Su Yu to see a healthy child. Now, her wish had finally come true. Su Yu already had an answer in his heart, but it was only when he heard it from Qin Siener's mouth that he felt at ease. He looked at Su Kai and squatted down to look at her. His heart was filled with an indescribable tenderness. It was no wonder that he had such a good impression of Su Kai when they first met. It was no wonder that Su Kai's cry for help could reach him. It was no wonder that he couldn't get angry at Su Kai. It turned out that she was his daughter. Was it fate, or was it the will of the heavens? He could have reunited with them earlier, but he had delayed it until today. When Su Kai heard their conversation, she opened her eyes wide and looked at Su Yu. She was like a wooden stake that couldn't budge. Is Uncle Su the father that I have never met? She had imagined countless scenes of reuniting with her father. In her imagination, she would scold her irresponsible father for abandoning her and her mother. In her imagination, she would sever all ties with her father and stop interacting with him. She would make him regret it for the rest of his life. However, she had never imagined that she would reunite with her father in such a way. In her mind, her heartless and cruel father was actually Uncle Su, who was kind and generous and had saved her from danger many times. This was the complete opposite of the father she had imagined. She looked at Su Yu in a daze, unable to say anything. She liked and relied on Uncle Su a lot, and she had an indescribable sense of trust in him. However, as for her father, she rejected him from the bottom of her heart. When the two of them merged into one, Su Kai felt that she couldn't face him. Her feelings at this moment were simply too complicated. Too complicated. Continue to hate me. Don't make things difficult for yourself. Su Yu extended his hand and stroked her head. His voice was calm and gentle. Su Kai raised her hand and wanted to slap his hand away. However, when she was in midair, she quietly withdrew her hand. Su Yu's words had caused the hatred in her heart to subside. Perhaps it was just as her mother had said. All these years, her father also had his own difficulties. I'm fine. As long as you're happy, it's fine. Su Kai looked at her mother. For the first time in more than 10 years, her cold face was filled with happiness and a smile. Su Yu looked at Su Kai deeply, his heart also feeling complicated. How could he make up for the lack of fatherly love that he had lost for more than 10 years? All of a sudden, several tyrannical auras appeared and rapidly closed in. Su Yu's eyes flickered. Let's talk somewhere else. With a wave of his hand, the mother and daughter were swept away. After a few breaths, 4 or 5 strong men arrived. None of their cultivation was lower than the old man's. They were at least at the void nirvana stage. There were even strong men at the nirvana void stage. Gone. The old man at the later stage of nirvana void narrowed his eyes and said coldly, that guy, Croquet, sent us a message before he died. He should be nearby. The group of people searched around but found nothing. Report to the master immediately. The descendant of the ancient god Juyu has appeared. It's time to search the entire sacred city at all costs. Chapter 26-24. Considering how much the Time Master valued the ancient god of Juyo, any search and capture operation was possible. In the upper palace, a ripple suddenly appeared in the guest room. Su Yu and his family appeared from it. Stay here for the time being. Try not to show your face in public in the future, Su Yu comforted them. The news that Qin Siener was the successor of the ancient god of Juyo had probably been exposed. Based on Su Yu's understanding of the Time Master, Qin Siener could not show her face easily. As long as I'm with you, it doesn't matter where I am, Qin Siener said. Su Yu looked at Qin Xianer deeply, his heart full of tenderness. Then he looked at Su Kai, a sense of satisfaction welling up in his heart. Their family was finally reunited. By the way, where is Luo Shui? Su Yu asked. He had asked Luo Shui to protect Qin Xianer, so why was she nowhere to be seen? Qin Xianer's face stiffened, and she said in a low voice, Shui, she might have met with misfortune. She fell from her deep happiness back to her heaviness. Su Kai said with red eyes, and Shui stayed behind to stop the enemy to protect us, but she never chased after us. Su Yu's heart skipped a beat. He stood where he was and slowly closed his eyes. A sense of destiny reverberated in front of him, one of which was Luo Shui. The ups and downs of her destiny indicated great danger. Opening his eyes, Su Yu heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, she is not dead, but her situation is not good. Luo Shui was most likely captured by the Time Master's people. Qin Xianer held Su Yu's arm and bit her red lips. She said, Brother Yu, Shui has always kept your promise. She has never left you, and she treats Kai like her own daughter. Our family owes her so much. As a woman, she understood Luo Shui's feelings. She had kept her promise for more than 10 years, not for money or fame. What was it for? Love, of course. Now her life was in danger because of this word. Qin Xianer felt extremely guilty. Su Kai bit her lips tightly. She did not want to beg Su Yu, but now she could only choke with sobs. Su, father, please save Aunt Shui. If anything happened to Luo Shui, Su Kai, I would feel the most guilty. Other than her mother, Luo Shui was the person who treated her the best. In her heart, Luo Shui's position was not much lower than her mother's, and she had fallen into the enemy's hands because of him. I know, don't be sad. Su Yu stroked her head and said, Your Aunt Shui is my lifelong friend, and even if you didn't ask me, I would still save her at all costs. Qin Xianer was holding Su Yu's arm, and it could be clearly felt that her body was trembling. It was worry. It will be difficult to rescue them. It was easy to imagine how difficult it would be to rescue someone from the hands of the time ruler. If he was not careful, he might even lose his life. I will make a detailed decision. All of you should rest here and avoid going out, Su Yu reminded them. After comforting them, Su Yu returned to the banquet. Senior, you're finally back. Yao Guang and the others were surprised. Su Yu had returned so quickly? Who did he kill? Su Yu nodded calmly and asked, Which one of you is most familiar with the Time Master? Everyone looked at each other. Yao Guang pondered for a moment and said, I wonder what Senior is asking about. None of them were familiar with the Time Sovereign. The Time Sovereign was in seclusion all year round and rarely showed his face. Even if they were the descendants of other sovereigns, they had only seen the Time Sovereign once in the Time Realm. After thinking for a while, Su Yu said, To be honest, one of my friends was captured by the Time Sovereign's people. Everyone's faces changed slightly. Senior, do you want to rescue them? Yao Guang and the others did not feel hostile towards Su Yu because of this. Among the people that the Time Sovereign had captured over the years, there were many ordinary people who were on good terms with them. Therefore, it was not strange at all. Well, do you know where the people who are captured are usually kept? Su Yu asked. Yao Guang's face darkened, and he shook his head slowly. Senior, I advise you to give up and stop thinking about rescuing them. The other descendants of the sovereigns nodded, and their eyes were full of fear. If you know anything or can help me in any way, please don't hesitate to tell me. Su Yu clenched his palm, and 8 different realms of comprehension appeared in his palm. If it is useful, I can point out the flaws in your realms. Lulua was the one who benefited the most from this. She quickly said, Senior, the people that the Time Sovereign captured are divided into 2 types, the ones that he doesn't value and the ones that he values. I don't know which type your friend belongs to. Su Yu's eyes flickered slightly. Was there a difference? The latter. Lulua shook her head slowly. Then, Senior, you really can give up. The enemies that the Time Sovereign doesn't value are probably under the custody of the 10 Great Guardians. The strength of those Great Guardians is at the peak of the Road Master level. Senior, you may be able to rescue them. But if the Time Sovereign values them, please give up, because the Time Sovereign will imprison those people in his wilderness of time and banish them for eternity. Wilderness of time. Su Yu was confused. Lulua added, the wilderness of time is the semi-real world that the Time Sovereign created with his lifetime time realm. There, time is eternal and infinite, and all living creatures are immortal. Once you fall into it, you will be bound forever and never be able to leave. It was easy to imagine that compared to the outside world, it was a world where time was frozen. Being frozen by time forever, it was obviously impossible to escape. The semi-real world is equivalent to a part of the Time Sovereign, not to mention sneaking in. Even a slight glance at it will be immediately detected by the Time Sovereign. Hearing this, Su Yu was expressionless. It was impossible to see how worried he was. However, his heart was exceptionally calm. If that was the case, there was no hope of rescuing people in secret. Actually, it's not completely hopeless, Yanran said hesitantly. Su Yu's eyes flickered. Why do you say that? Yanran said hesitantly. I wonder if Senior knows that the descendants of the Time Sovereign are qualified to exchange for the ruler's treasures. I know. Su Yu's heart thumped. Could it be those ruler's treasures are all in the semi-real world? The descendants of the Time Sovereigns must personally promise to go there and collect the ruler's treasures corresponding to their contributions, Yanran said meaningfully. If Senior can find a descendant of the Time Sovereign who is willing to support him, you can still go in. But whether you can rescue your friend without being detected by the Time Sovereign, I can't guarantee. No one could be sure that rescuing that friend would alert the Time Sovereign. Chapter 26-25. Empress Star Rain's letter of authorization was with the accompanying Road Master. Su Yu had originally planned to arrange for him to retrieve the ruler's treasure without revealing himself, in case the Time Master found out anything. But now that he thought about it, he might really have to go. After a moment, he made up his mind. Luo Shui was willing to sacrifice his own life for his wife and child. What else did he have to hesitate about? Okay. Su Yu nodded, then secretly crushed a piece of jade to inform the Path Master, telling him to wait for him at the appointed place. But at that moment, at the top of the upper palace, a vortex of air currents appeared silently. From the vortex, an unfurled scroll floated down rapidly, full of indescribable pressure. The entire upper palace trembled because of it. At the table where they were, the wine and dishes on the table were constantly swaying. The wine in the cups were shaking uncontrollably, constantly splashing out. The chairs under everyone's feet were also moving uncontrollably. Everyone, including themselves, felt a sense of oppression as if their souls and bodies were about to be separated. Yao Guang's face changed dramatically, and he led the many Time Masters in the upper palace to kneel down. We welcome the decree of the Time Master. That was nothing more than a decree issued by the Time Sovereign. The Time Master did not even reveal a trace of her will. But even so, it still brought unimaginable pressure. Su Yu naturally would not kneel down to the Time Master, but as the scroll approached, he could feel the endless pressure. He forcibly stabilized his body, not allowing himself to kneel down. But his soul was constantly trembling, faintly trying to break through the shackles of his body and escape. Finally, it was close. The scroll stopped 10 feet in the air, and a voice came from the scroll. It was not clear whether the voice belonged to a man or a woman, but it was unusually deep. Everyone in the sky, track down the 2 people below, no mistakes. As the voice fell, the scroll burned on the spot, turning into an image. In the image, the figures of Qin Xianer and Su Kai were visible. We accept the order. The descendants of the Time Masters said yes. Only then did the wisp of pressure disperse. They slowly stood up. All of them were drenched in sweat. Traces of lingering fear could be seen on their faces. How high is the cultivation of the Time Master now? Lulua's face was slightly pale. Just now, she was almost suffocated by that scroll. The alcade was filled with indescribable awe. Don't make wild guesses. We won't be able to understand the cultivation base of a sovereign. That is, unless we become a sovereign one day. Su Yu was still sitting in his original position, but his back was already wet, and the chair under his feet had been shattered by the pressure just now. He had to use a strand of profound way energy to forcefully maintain the chair. It was too terrifying. That was the ruler of time. An imperial edict already possessed such divine might. One could imagine if the person himself appeared. No, there was no need for him to show himself. Just a thought incarnation would be enough to kill Su Yu without a proper burial ground. This trip to the time wilderness of the Time Ruler was really too dangerous. The slightest carelessness would spell eternal damnation. Who are these two women? Why did the sovereign personally issue an order to capture them? Yao Guang and the others recovered from their shock and began to copy down the images that were about to disappear. Lulua glanced over and was also very puzzled. And two humans. How strange. What do they have that is worthy of the Time Ruler's attention? The Time Ruler, who hadn't shown his face for countless years, had actually come all the way here just for these two women. At this time, several figures walked in one after another. Reporting to my lords, I have news to report. Several people each presented a message jade. There were 8 in total. After opening it, the news inside, without exception, was that all the forces, big and small, had received the imperial edict of the Time Ruler. Even in the sacred city, those who were not worth his attention had received the edict of the Time Ruler. It could be said that overnight, the entire sacred city, all the forces, big and small, had received the order of the Time Ruler. Moreover, the news was still spreading at an alarming speed. Before midnight, the entire world would remember the two women who were personally wanted by the Time Ruler. So strict. Several descendants of the Time Ruler gasped. What kind of existence were those two women? Yao Guang said solemnly, immediately mobilize the forces of the Upper Palace and begin the search. The Upper Palace also controlled a lot of forces and immediately began a strict search around the Upper Palace. Do the Upper Palace need to be searched? Lulua asked hesitantly. Yao Guang pondered and said, for safety's sake, except for the guest room of the senior, search all the other guest rooms. This time the Time Ruler was serious, and they did not want to be careless. If it was really a coincidence that the two wanted people were hiding in their place, the situation would be too serious. Therefore, the Upper Palace also began a strict search. Except for the superior guest room where Su Yu was, all the other guest rooms were searched. Of course, the result was nothing. Senior, we need to go out and participate in the search. Please excuse us for a while, Yao Guang said, cupping his hands. Su Yu shook his head and said, it's fine. You can go. When they all left, Su Yu returned to the guest room, expressionless, looking at Qin Xianer and Su Kai, who were hiding. He could not help but secretly feel lucky. Coming to the Upper Palace under false pretenses was the right move. Otherwise, they would be running in all directions. With the current situation in the outside world, hiding anywhere would not be as safe as the Upper Palace. Brother Yu, are they searching for us? Qin Xianer asked worriedly. Just now, there were messy sounds coming from the left and right rooms. Yes, but don't worry, Su Yu comforted her. As he spoke, he looked at Su Kai, only to find that Su Kai and Huang Fu were discussing the martial path with great interest. The two of them were about the same age, so they got along very well. After thinking for a while, Su Yu said, Kai, I have a place suitable for training. Do you want to go in and have a spar? Su Kai eyes lit up. Sure. Her martial path was too weak, so she had always wanted to improve by sparring with her peers. Unfortunately, she had too few friends. Huang Fu Yi's abilities were about the same as hers, so she was the perfect match. Su Yu took out a space storage device. The little Kylin and the others were in it. The space rippled, and the two of them were sucked into it. They trained quietly. Only Su Yu and Qin Xianer were left in the room. The two of them looked at each other, speechless. Then they hugged each other and kissed. In the end, their yearning for each other for more than 10 years turned into a night of passion. The next day, Xianer's face was flushed, and she lay in Su Yu's arms, exhausted. The previous night had been too crazy. She was exhausted, and she did not have any strength left. She allowed Su Yu's hands to play with her sensitive parts. "Brother Yu, I'm so happy," Qin Xianer said, her eyes closed. Su Yu smiled, his eyes filled with satisfaction. Chapter 26:26. In his absence, Qin Xianer had raised Su Kai, or with great determination. How much hardship had she suffered? How much had she suffered? He owed Xianer too much. Looking at Xianer, who was gradually falling asleep, Su Yu slowly pulled the blanket over her and got up. Xianer should rest now, but Su Yu still had things to do. He put on his bamboo hat and left the upper palace to meet the Path Master. Along the way, Su Yu frowned slightly. The search was more thorough than he had imagined. The entire sacred city had come to a standstill because of the search. Shops, inns, caves, restaurants, residence debts, abandoned houses, wherever it was possible, people from different forces would go back and forth to search again and again. Some places where there were tunnels were even destroyed by the strong men, digging 3 feet into the ground to find them. "This is madness," Su Yu said coldly. The entire sacred city was filled with a kind of morbid madness, which showed how much they feared the Time Master. An edict without any reward made them carry it out like crazy. It showed the majesty of the Time Master. He came to the inn where the Path Master was. However, it was already empty inside, and there was a mess of chests and cabinets being overturned everywhere. Only the shopkeeper and the waiters were tidying things up bitterly. "Where are the guests inside?" Su Yu asked with a frown. He had already sent a message to the Path Master in advance, and the latter should be waiting for him here. "They've all been arrested." The shopkeeper sighed. Su Yu raised his eyebrows. "Arrested? Why? Weren't they only searching for Qin Xianer and Su Kai? Why were they even arresting innocent people?" "It's all because—" The shopkeeper hesitated and pointed to the sky cautiously, implying that it was all because of the imperial edict that fell from the sky. "Anyway, the outsiders in the inn have all been labeled as suspects and have been arrested. They should now be locked up in the temporary prison outside the city and interrogated one by one." It turned out that the large-scale search last night had yielded nothing. So they had changed to arresting the outsiders to see if they could find any relevant clues from them. Su Yu frowned. This was really messing around. As such, Su Yu had no choice but to leave the city. There was a huge formation outside the city, and it was at the level of the Master of the Heaven Law. Hundreds of millions of all kinds of living creatures were bound in the formation. All of them were caught last night. With that powerful formation, no one would be able to escape after being captured. Su Yu hid in the dark, his gaze sweeping across the area. Very quickly, he discovered the Path Master who was traveling with him. The latter had a helpless look on his face as he waited for the Time Sovereign's personal guards to examine him. As Empress Star Rain's guard, he was naturally not a suspect. After searching his soul, he easily let him go. "Come here," Su Yu said through telepathy. When the guard heard this, he immediately walked over calmly. "Lord Su, it's great that you're fine." He had assumed that Su Yu had also been captured. The sacred city had really gone crazy yesterday. The people of the Time Ruler were everywhere, wantonly capturing people. Anyone who wasn't a local would be arrested. Yesterday, he had been perfectly fine at the inn, but a group of Sovereign's personal guards had taken him away. Su Yu said, Do you still have the proof of the Empress? The latter nodded and took out a letter of authorization from Empress Star Rain. With this item in hand, one could represent Empress Star Rain in the wilderness of time and exchange contribution points for a corresponding sovereign treasure. When does my lord plan to go? In another half a month. The wilderness of time will be off limits. So you thought for a moment. Tonight. Every moment he delayed, Luo Xue would be in more danger. The sooner he could be rescued, the safer he would be. My lord, be careful. After entering the wilderness of time, remember to abide by the rules inside. Don't act at will, or your life will be in danger. Su Yu nodded. I understand. After receiving the letter of authorization, Su Yu was about to tell him to go back first. Suddenly his eyes locked on a man and a woman in the formation. The man was a blind man with his hands on the shoulders of a young and beautiful woman. Under the latter's guidance, he groped his way forward. Seeing these two people, Su Yu's pupils shrank slightly. Byun Hong Xian? Golden-eyed Lang Jun? Su Yu was surprised. He didn't expect to see these two in the sacred city. He wanted to come forward and greet them, but in the end he gave up. Tonight he was going to the wilderness of time, and it was not advisable to complicate matters. He restrained his breath and quietly left with the master of the path. Byun Hong Xian seemed to sense something, and a pair of golden eyes looked in the direction of Su Yu's departure. Hong Xian, what are you looking at? Golden-eyed Lang Jun asked when he sensed that Byun Hong Xian had stopped in her tracks. Byun Hong Xian shook her head. Nothing. She felt that she had sensed wrongly, because just now she seemed to have felt Su Yu's gaze. Don't get distracted. According to the original plan, we will enter the wilderness of time tonight and exchange for the ruler's treasure. If it goes well, we will not be noticed by the ruler. Golden-eyed Lang Jun said. Byun Hong Xian's expression became serious. She said, after seeing the majesty of the ruler of time yesterday, Father, do you still think that we will succeed this time? Although golden-eyed Lang Jun was blind, his heart was still cunning and intelligent. Don't worry, as long as we act according to my plan, everything will go smoothly. From then on, we will be the people that great Emperor Xiaohao can rely on the most. When he becomes the ruler of time one day, it will be the day that we will soar. Byun Hong Xian was not without doubts. Father, is this really okay? Your plan excludes Yanran, Byun Hong Xian said worriedly. Golden-eyed Lang Jun sneered. Do you still want to be under that woman? Along the way, she tried to kill you many times. Byun Hong Xian was silent. Indeed, both of them and Yanran were ordered by Xiaohao to come to the sacred city to exchange for the ruler's treasure. But along the way, Yanran showed her murderous intent more than once. Even after arriving at the sacred city, she left the two of them behind and went to the upper palace. I think it's better for Father to make a new plan. I always feel that that woman is not so easy to deal with. Golden-eyed Lang Jun had an air of arrogance about him. Don't worry, I have everything planned out. It is foolproof. Night. 9 moons shone brightly in the sky above the sacred city. Compared to the previous night's wild manhunt in the sacred city, it was exceptionally quiet today. In front of the Hall of Masters, Su Yu stood in front of the stairs and stared at the seemingly ordinary hall. He was secretly shocked. At first glance, it was indeed an ordinary hall that could not be any more ordinary. But only the Time Realm experts could sense the extraordinariness of this hall. These bricks and tiles were no ordinary objects. They were formed from the power of the time domain. The hall was in front of him, but in fact, it was not in the space and time in front of him. Instead, it was in another space and time. No one could damage a brick or a tile of the Master Hall unless they had the ability to destroy even the space and time of the past. Chapter 26-27. If he was not careful, he would be lost in it, never to come out again. Who are you? Su Yu had just arrived at the door of the Hall of Gods when someone shouted at him. Looking up, it was the giant door of the Hall of Gods that was speaking. A 5-colored mouth appeared on the giant door. It was the one speaking. The Star Rain Empress has sent an envoy to exchange for the master's treasure. Su Yu took out the letter of authorization. Swoosh! The letter of authorization flew out of his hand and into the mouth. As it chewed, it slowly nodded. The letter of authorization is not here. You may enter. Come here and be inspected. As it spoke, the giant mouth slowly opened. Inspection. Su Yu's eyes slowly narrowed. He had never heard of the so-called entry test when he had learned about it beforehand. What are you hesitating for? Come here quickly. The giant mouth urged. Since yesterday, the master has personally arranged for an inspection. All those who enter must have their identities checked. The master must have caught Luo Shuai and taken precautions to prevent anyone bold enough to barge into the Hall of Gods to rescue Luo Shuai. Su Yu hesitated there. The inspection of this giant mouth should be able to see through the bamboo hat, right? It could even detect the 8 great domains in his body. Once his identity as the successor of the ancient god Jilong was exposed, Su Yu could not imagine what the consequences would be. Why are you hesitating? Is your identity suspicious? Crash! 2 clay men walked out of the giant door. They looked simple and crude, but each of them exuded an extremely ancient aura. There was a hint of primordial spirit in that aura. Su Yu's pupils shrank slightly. Were these puppets made from the soil at the beginning of the world? The cultivation of each puppet was frighteningly high, as strong as the peak of the Earth Master level. Su Yu was sure that if he wanted to escape, he was afraid that if he turned around, he would be smashed into pieces. His mind was racing. What should he do now? He was in a dilemma. After a moment's thought, he stepped forward and entered the giant mouth. Instead of being killed by the 2 clay men, it was better to think of a solution in the giant mouth. As soon as he entered, beams of purple light shot towards him. He instinctively wanted to dodge, but the voice of the giant mouth sounded in his ears. Don't move. Be inspected, or you will be treated as suspicious and killed. As if responding to the giant mouth's words, the rays of purple light turned into peerless sharp rays. Su Yu held his breath and tried his best to gather all the 8 great domains in his body and his abdomen, compressing them into a single point. Whoosh! The first ray of purple light pierced through his body without any resistance. Physical examination. Ordinary human race bloodline. Ghost race bloodline. Dragon race bloodline and impure bloodline. Physical fitness low. Then, the second beam of purple light shot over. Su Yu suddenly felt as if something had passed through his soul. Soul inspection. High-quality soul, tenacious and after marriage, pure and extraordinary soul power. There was a hint of surprise in the giant mouth's voice. It was obvious that Su Yu possessed a powerful soul that was incompatible with his human body. Domain detection. Another beam of purple light shot toward Su Yu's body, searching for possible domains. Su Yu could clearly feel a consciousness spreading from his head to the rest of his body. Neck, chest, abdomen. Every place was checked very carefully, and it was impossible to miss anything. It was probably because of Su Yu's previous performance that the giant mouth was suspicious of him. Hence, the examination was extremely slow and meticulous. The consciousness was getting closer and closer to his abdomen. Seeing that it was about to be detected, Su Yu's heart sank. If it was really detected, he would have to try his best to escape. However, to Su Yu's surprise, the consciousness had penetrated his abdomen. It did not detect the existence of the domain at all. When the consciousness finished checking Su Yu's whole body, it still did not stop and checked again. But it still did not find the existence of the 8 domains. Well, the domain is the wind domain, and it is low grade. The giant mouth finally felt relieved. Identity inspection passed. Go in. Su Yu walked into the depths of the Hall of Gods with some doubts. Following the tunnel in the mouth, he successfully entered the Hall of Gods. Inside the hall, there was indeed a place with abnormal time and space. From the outside, the Hall of Gods was in a bustling, sacred city. But when he was here, he found that there was a long river near the Hall of Gods. Su Yu was no stranger to that long river. It was the Time Reverse River. The Hall of Gods was by the river. A group of people with different cultivations were gathered by the river, talking to each other. Su Yu's arrival attracted the attention of some of them. "Oh, it seems that we have another competitor." A creature with a sharp horn on his head cast a mocking look at him. His cultivation was not weak, reaching the later stage of nirvana. A human? That's strange. Which descendant of the master ruler appointed a human to take on the important task of exchanging for the master ruler's treasures? Su Yu did not say anything and looked at them silently. There were 9 people in total. From their positions, postures, and races, it was obvious that they did not belong to the same group of people. What a coincidence! They all came together, Su Yu said to himself. After coming to the sacred city for a while, Su Yu had a general understanding of the entire time domain. The time domain, under the rule of the Time Master, was divided into 3 realms. Among them, the Dream Duan realm was one of them. In addition, there was the Heavenly Awakening realm and the Nether realm. The other 2 realms also had descendants of the Time Master, and there were more of them than the Dream Duan realm. The group of people in front of him should be from the Heavenly Awakening realm and the Nether realm. For some unknown reason, people from the 2 realms chose to go to the sacred city at the same time to exchange for the master ruler's treasures. Could there be a secret that the Dream Duan realm did not know? Deep in thought, Su Yu went to a corner and did not talk much with them. "Brother, are you the representative of one of the Time Masters of the Dream Duan realm?" A red-haired, middle-aged man walked over with a smile. He was talking to Su Yu amiably. "I am the representative of the Heavenly Awakening realm, the red snow sword of the Brahma Heaven, Great Emperor. I am here to collect the Master Ruler's treasures," the red-haired middle-aged man said with a smile. His expression did not show the contempt that the other creatures had for the human race. Su Yu said calmly, "The representative of the Star Rain Empress of the Dream Duan realm, Su Yu." He did not trust him much because of the other party's attitude. Could someone sent by the Brahma Heaven Great Emperor to collect the Master Ruler's treasures be a simple-minded person? Obviously not. "Oh, it's you, Su Yu." There was a subtle flash of contempt in the red snow sword's eyes. The reputation of the Star Rain Empress was well known even in the Heavenly Awakening realm. It was said that she was the weakest in all aspects among all the descendants of the Time Master. She had not even awakened her bloodline. There was no hope for her to compete for the position of the Master. "I wonder what grade of the Master Ruler's treasures are you planning to exchange for?" the red snow sword asked with a smile. Su Yu said calmly, "It's barely enough to exchange for it." "What grade is it?" The lowest grade to exchange for was 300. Only 300? Chapter 26-28. Hee, Brother Red, if I were you, I wouldn't even bother to ask. Empress Star Rain being able to gather 300 contribution points is already unprecedented, and yet you're still looking forward to her contribution points. A being with half black and half light chuckled softly. Su Yu glanced at him indifferently. His contribution points were 500. He didn't know if it was considered high or low among all the descendants of the Masters. "Don't mind her, Su Yu. Dark Sky Deity is this kind of person." Red Snow Sword comforted him and took the opportunity to leave. Obviously, he had also lost interest in Su Yu. Perhaps 300 contribution points was too far from his expectations. The group of people was still waiting here. To go to the Time Wilderness, they had to take the boat specially built by the Time Master. Otherwise, none of them would be able to go against the flow of time. As they waited patiently, several days passed. Su Yu's mood became more and more anxious day by day. Half a month later, a small boat slowly went against the flow of time at the end of the long river. On the boat stood a clay man. His cultivation was similar to that of the guards at the gate. The clay man rode and slowly approached the shore. Red Snow soared, Dark Sky Deity, and the others were a little excited as they came to the shore and jumped onto the boat. Suyu also jumped on and waited for the boat to set sail. Just then, two more figures passed through the giant mouth and arrived in the hall. Looking over, it was none other than Zhang Xian. It was Golden-Eyed Lang Jun and by Yun Hongxian. Suyu pressed down on his bamboo hat and couldn't help but be surprised. Why did they come together? Did they also represent the descendants of the masters? Crash! Just then, another figure arrived. It was none other than Yanran. She walked a few steps quickly and rushed in front of Golden-Eyed Lang Jun and the others. Without looking back, she said, "Listen to my instructions along the way." Golden-Eyed Lang Jun and by Yun Hongxian nodded, not daring to refute. Suyu saw this. It turned out that after coming to the 8-star civilization, they had joined Xiaohao's forces. He sat quietly on the side of the boat, not saying a word. After Yanran and the others boarded the boat, they did not recognize Suyu. She glanced around and found that only a few people had not concealed themselves. The rest were all hidden. For a moment, she was not sure if Suyu had come here. Crash! The boat left the shore and led the people upstream against the flow of time. Along the way, scenes of the past could be seen lingering in his mind. These images recorded the experiences of the Time Sovereign. Most of his time was spent cultivating and living a peaceful life. But the further they went, the closer it was to the beginning of the Great Era. The more horrifying those experiences became. Scenes of the Time Sovereign battling the various mighty beings of heaven and earth, as well as the various peerless powerhouses, flashed before his eyes. None of the images showed the Time Ruler's face. All he could see was the back of the Time Sovereign. Any powerful enemy would be reduced to dust under the suppression of that valiant figure. Finally, when the boat arrived at its destination, in the distance, an extremely vast scene entered everyone's eyes. Once again, it was the sovereign of time battling the enemy. What was different was that the Time Ruler was accompanied by a gloomy young man holding a 9-colored ruler. The two stood side by side. At the same time, he was facing an ice-cold woman wearing a black cloak and a phoenix coronet. The latter's entire body was burning with endless black flames, burning the world to pieces. In the eyes of the black-robed woman, the vast expanse and the great earth were like mud pellets. As for the Time Ruler and the young man with the 9-colored ruler, they exuded a peak aura of destruction. The two supreme existences stared at each other in another space and time. The invisible collision between them created a peerless aura that could destroy the world. Before the boat even got close, the bow of the boat creaked. It became extremely difficult for the boat to move forward. The clay man used all of his strength to barely push the boat forward. But the further they went, the more terrifying the aura became. Everyone on the boat felt suffocated. They even had the urge to kneel and worship it. That was just a scene from the past. An entire era had passed since then. However, the remaining pressure still posed a great threat to them. The clay man growled, his body exuding a thick aura of absolute beginning, forcefully stared at the terrifying pressure. Only then did everyone feel slightly better. But even so, their hearts still beat wildly. Looking at the scene in front of them, they felt that the battle in the scene was not in the distant past. It was right in front of them. Dong! Finally, the boat reached the shore with difficulty. Under the protection of the clay man, they successfully reached the shore. After reaching the shore, the pressure disappeared without a trace. But there was still a lingering fear in everyone's eyes. It's too terrifying. Is that a war of that level? War? You think too much. They just stood there and looked at each other. They haven't fought yet. If they had fought, we would have died just now. Hearing this, everyone was even more shocked. A war of that level, even if separated by an era, could still kill all of them in the future. Who are those people? Are they the supreme existences in the world? Among them, perhaps only Suyu understood. The woman in black was the fallen ancient god Jiao, and opposite her was the time ruler. The other was Xiaoyao, son of heaven, and it was Xiaoyao, son of heaven. Xiaoyao, son of heaven, and the time ruler joined forces to kill the ancient god Jiao. This was the truth of the past. In the early years of the era, the ancient god Jiao seized the fortunes of the 8 rulers, so that the 8 rulers could not break through to another level. The 8 great ancient gods took the opportunity to rise and become existences above the rulers. With the strength of the rulers, it was impossible to defeat the ancient gods. There must have been another more powerful force involved. Now the truth was clear. It was the stone-birth son of heaven. They personally attacked and killed several ancient gods. The remaining ancient gods hid in the Tao abyss, never to see the light of day. The entire 8-star civilization, many ancient god realms, were all occupied by the rulers, and they had been constantly excavating and mining. The rulers hoped to find back the destiny that had been taken from them by excavating the resources of the ancient god realm. In order to break through the shackles and become an existence with strength comparable to the ancient gods. But so far, no ruler had succeeded. That was why the time ruler was so eager to catch the descendants of the ancient god Jiao. Even if the sacred city was in chaos, they had to catch Qin Xianer and Su Kai. Su Yu clenched his fists. He would never allow Xianer to fall into their hands, no matter what. Look, that is Tianluan Mountain, where the ruler's treasure is. Someone suddenly saw a snow mountain rising from the ground in the distance. On the mountain stood a green pine tree. The tree was covered with sealed magic treasures. There were 79 in total. At this time, the voice of the clay man came from behind. Chapter 26-29. You can only take the treasures corresponding to the ruler, understand? Everyone nodded. Even without the clay figurine's warning, they wouldn't dare to take treasures that were worth more than their contribution points. Otherwise, the consequences would be dire. Looks like you understand this very well. But I still have to explain, the clay figurine said. If you take treasures that are worth more than your contribution points, you will be attacked by the time wilderness. When that time comes, all of you will die here. No one will be spared, understand? Everyone's pupils constricted upon hearing this. The dark heavenly god asked, wait, if someone else takes it, we will also be implicated, right? The clay figurine replied indifferently, yes. The power of the time wilderness is too powerful. Unless a ruler is present, no one will be able to control it. Once it is activated, it will be an indiscriminate and destructive attack. Everyone drew a sharp intake of breath upon hearing this. Weren't the consequences a little too severe? If one of them made a stupid mistake, everyone would be buried with him. Now, everyone who was about to charge forward was hesitant and didn't dare to do so. If a group of people charged forward and one of them made a mistake, everyone else wouldn't be able to escape even if they wanted to. If they stayed here, they would still be able to hide in the small boat before the disaster struck. The dark heavenly god pondered for a moment before saying, how about this? Each of us will go alone, and we'll draw lots to decide who goes first. Everyone would take turns going alone. If someone made a stupid mistake, they would only be harming themselves and wouldn't be able to affect anyone else. Unfortunately, no one responded to him. That's easy for you to say. The first person to go will be able to exchange for the best treasures of the same level. It's not fair to just draw lots. The red snow sword shook its head. It was also a treasure that required 300 contribution points. There was a difference in power between the treasures. The first person to go would naturally have an advantage. Those who went later could only suffer in silence. Who would be willing to draw lots to decide who went first? The dark heavenly god harumphed. Then what do you think we should do? Just as everyone was debating, 2 figures emerged from the crowd. They were by Yun Hong Xian and Golden-Eyed Gentleman. The latter laughed. Please wait here, I'll go first. Everyone's expressions shifted. Who would be willing to wait here foolishly? So be it. I hope the special cultivator doesn't do anything stupid. The more contribution points he has, the bigger the treasure. Dark Sky Deity gritted her teeth and charged forward. Just like that, the people who hadn't reached an agreement immediately swarmed over. Su Yu took a step forward, but when his gaze fell upon the golden-eyed Lang Jun and his daughter, he hesitated before taking a step back. He might not understand others, but how could the golden-eyed Lang Jun not understand him? He was a man full of ambition and scheming. Just now, there was a chance that they could reach an agreement, but it was golden-eyed Lang Jun who took the initiative to ruin it. As a result, everyone rushed over. Su Yu would never believe that he had no ulterior motives. They were about to reach the tree. Su Yu's heart stirred, and a beautiful space domain was displayed. His body turned into a puddle of water. In an instant, he arrived under the tree. Yan Ran also arrived at the same time. She looked at Su Yu in surprise, then suddenly realized something. You really came? Apart from Su Yu, who else could use her space domain? Su Yu nodded hurriedly. Before the others arrived, he immediately took out Empress Star Rain's proof of contribution and placed it on the highest treasure. It was a purple ring, carved with the insights of many path masters. Traces of destructive power seeped out from it, turning into purple light that scattered all over the sky. Half of the sky was occupied by the purple light. It was the third-ranked treasure among all the Dominator treasures. It required 500 contribution points. Dark Sky Deity, who saw this scene from afar, cursed angrily, "Retreat! He's up to no good." Red Snow Sword's eyelids twitched wildly. Without thinking, he turned around and fled. His heart was also filled with anger. Did the representative sent by Empress Star Rain think that if I can't get it, no one else can either? His contribution points were pitifully low, but he deliberately took the third-ranked ring, hoping to take the opportunity to trigger the attack of the Time Wilderness. The people who were swarming over immediately retreated, like the tide. Golden-eyed Lang Jun, who was being carried by Yun Hongxian, kept retreating. In a low voice, he said, "Hongxian, what's going on?" Bai Yun Hongxian pursed her lips and said, "Someone has arrived first and is preparing to trigger the attack of the Time Wilderness." What? Golden-eyed Lang Jun had a murderous look on his face. Damn it, who ruined my plan? Everyone ran for their lives, fearing that the formation behind them would attack them. However, to their surprise, the formation of the Time Wilderness had not been activated for a long time. When they looked back, Su Yu had taken off the purple gold ring and was holding it in his hand. It had not triggered any attack from the Time Wilderness. Everyone was stunned for a moment, but then they understood. Could it be that Empress Star Rain's people have successfully obtained 500 contribution points? That's impossible. Red Snow Sword was the most shocked. Our Empress only obtained 430 points. 430 points was already the highest among them. Unexpectedly, Su Yu's was even higher. It had reached 500 points. Put it down. That treasure is mine. Dark Sky Deity was furious. Before he came, the descendant of the Dominator had told him that he must obtain the third-ranked Purple Light Killing Ring. With this ring, he would be invincible in the battle for the Dominator. As for the first-ranked and second-ranked treasures, no one would be able to obtain them, because the required contribution points were astronomical, and no descendant of the Time Master could collect them. But they had already retreated a lot, putting a long distance between them. Su Yu had plenty of time to leave. He looked at Yan Ran beside him. She was still hesitating about which treasure to choose. Su Yu pondered for a moment, then grabbed her shoulder and said, "Come with me." Yan Ran said in surprise, "Wait, Senior. I haven't chosen yet." "It's too late." As she cried out, Su Yu activated the space domain and fled. He did not return to the ship, but instead headed deep into the Time Wilderness. Yan Ran was furious, even if she respected Su Yu and wanted to borrow his strength. But Su Yu had taken her away from the Dominator's treasure without permission, causing her to lose her first choice. She could not help but be angry. That was the key to determining the outcome of the battle between the descendants of the Dominator. Su, you had ruined it. Let go of me, Yanran shouted, struggling to break free from Su Yu's hand, especially when she found that the group of people had already reached the snowy mountain and had begun to exchange for the Dominator's treasures. She was anxious and resentful. She wanted to slap Su Yu on the spot. How could he be so despicable? Chapter 2630. Soon, the tree completely disappeared from sight. Only then did Su Yu slowly stop and stand in front of a mountain peak. He turned and looked into the distance. Yanran was released, and her face was full of anger. Senior, what do you mean by this? Are you deliberately making an enemy out of Xiaohao? Su Yu raised his finger and pointed into the distance. Take your time, and you will understand. Look at what? Yanran stared into the distance, but there was nothing there. At this moment, on the snowy mountain, everyone swarmed over, almost scrambling to exchange their certificates for the Dharma treasures they needed. Everyone was very cautious. They would only take treasures that were lower than their contribution points, and they would not dare to overstep their boundaries. However, there was one person who exceeded everyone's expectations. That was the golden-eyed gentleman. At his command, Byun Hongxian flew to the top of the tree and picked up the number 1 treasure. Seeing this, the rest of the people turned pale with fear. It was impossible for anyone to gather enough contribution points for the number 1 treasure. The dark sky deity was furious. Put it down! With a roar, the dark sky deity's body erupted with 2 opposing forces, darkness and light. Light and darkness. The 2 forces annihilated each other, turning into a blurry state of ashes that rained down on Byun Hongxian. The power was comparable to that of a Pathmaster. Byun Hongxian was only at the level of a yellow Pathmaster, so how could she avoid it? However, at the critical moment, Byun Hongxian avoided it as if she had foreseen it. The attack that was supposed to kill missed. Then, she casually stretched out her hand and plucked the most powerful Dharma treasure. As soon as the treasure left the tree, the wilderness of time began to shake violently. The clear sky suddenly turned into a sea of fire. Countless flames fell from the sky, pouring over everything within a radius of billions of miles. The terrifying flames were enough to destroy everything. Even if a Pathmaster was here, he would be annihilated in an instant. The dark sky deity turned pale with fright. She did not even care about the treasure in her hand, and crushed an extremely high-grade, life-saving treasure. The treasure engulfed her figure, and before the flames fell, it turned into a residual shadow and flew towards the small boat. However, before she arrived, a sea of fire descended on the shore. A blood-curdling wail erupted, and even the powerful heavenly god and was instantly incinerated into nothingness by the sea of flames. The same scene appeared in every corner. In this moment of crisis, all of the hegemon descendants used secret arts to flee for their lives. But in the end, without exception, they were all engulfed into ashes by the raging flames that fell from the sky. Ah, you 2 bitches! Endless screams, countless hateful curses, and countless ashes interweaved in the raging inferno. Only an extremely small number of sovereign representatives were fortunate enough to avoid the flames and escape into the depths of the wilderness of time. As for Golden-Eyed Playboy and Byun Hongxian, they were able to predict the future. Every step they took was in front of the falling flames. As if he was walking on flat ground, he easily avoided all the descending flames. Before the entire land was engulfed in flames, he calmly left that area. Looking back, it had turned into a living hell. All of the hegemon representatives had perished here. As for the pine tree with the sovereign treasure sealed within it, it was burned to a crisp by the time wasteland attack. The many Dharma treasures on it all flew in all directions like shooting stars. Golden-eyed Playboy raised his head, his eyes following one of them. That one, go after it. That was the number 1 sovereign treasure. although Bai Yunhongxian had taken it just now, she had not been able to get it. The moment the raging inferno descended, the treasure flew out of her hands. Bai Yunhongxian nodded and hurried over. At the same time, on a distant mountain peak, Yanran, who had been furious, stood where she was, her face pale. She could not help but tremble in fear. In her senses, the auras of the representatives of the hegemons disappeared one after another. All of them had perished in the sudden, heavenly fire. Suyu said slowly, "Do you know why now?" Yanran came back to her senses and knelt down without hesitation, kowtowing repeatedly. "Senior, I am unable to repay you for saving my life." How could she not understand that Suyu had noticed something was amiss, so he had immediately taken her away? Otherwise, she would not have been able to escape in time if she had stayed to pick up the items. Recalling how she had almost spoken harshly to Suyu, Yanran's face was full of shame. She kept apologizing. "I was foolish. Please punish me, Senior." Suyu's expression was indifferent. "For the sake of our acquaintance, I saved your life." As soon as she looked up, she saw a meteor flying over her head. Suyu reached out and grabbed it. A space domain descended and grabbed it. When he took it back to his palm, he saw that it was a talisman. The talisman was an early-stage Heaven Law Master level defensive treasure. Once it was used, it could block a blow from the Heaven Law Master. It was one of the lowest-level, sovereign, magical treasures in existence. Suyu put it in his pocket and stared at the scattered stars in the sky. He said, "If you don't mind, can you come with me to search for those scattered treasures?" Yanran also noticed that many sovereign treasures were scattered in all directions, waiting for people to snatch them. Among all the sovereign representatives, only Suyu, Yanran, and a few others were left. All of those treasures belonged to them. Yanran's heart skipped a beat. She was wild with joy. "As you wish, Senior." Suyu's eyes flickered as he fled in all directions with Yanran in his arms. In fact, Suyu's target was not the sovereign treasures. He was looking for Luo Shui in the process of searching for the sovereign treasures. The reason he brought Yanran with him was that he wanted to use her identity as the descendant of the Space Master to hide his space domain ability. Otherwise, he would have used the space domain alone. The Time Master would have been able to detect the abnormality of Suyu's identity immediately. On the contrary, with Yanran around, even if the Time Master saw it, he would take it for granted that it was Yanran's space domain. After all, they were in the wilderness of time. Suyu had to be cautious. The two of them were chasing a star, speeding through the wilderness. Just like its name, the wilderness of time was barren. There was no existence of time at all. Everything was the same. They were speeding here, unaware of the passage of time. Suyu took the opportunity to search for Luo Shui. Along the way, he occasionally found many people who were exiled here. They were probably like Luo Shui, people who were valued by the Time Master and thus trapped here. Unfortunately, Luo Shui was not among them. After an unknown period of time, they finally caught up with the speeding star. When he grabbed it, he saw that it was a low-level offensive treasure, which looked like a staff. It was also a one-time offensive treasure, containing the strength of an early-stage Heavenly Law Master. Suyu grabbed it and threw it to Yanran. Chapter 2631. Suyu said, "Take it, there are still many more treasures behind." Only by giving her some benefits would she have something to accompany Suyu in his search for Luo Shui. Suyu stared at the place where the second star had fallen and continued to move forward. Yanran was eager to try and look forward to it. Soon the second star was found. It was a treasure worth 400 contribution points. Among the 49 treasures, it was considered a mid-level treasure. However, it was an auxiliary treasure, and its function was to forcefully take away a treasure of the same level from the opponent. Suyu accepted it, and Yanran did not have any objections. Then he found the third treasure. Suyu gave it to Yanran, and the latter beamed with joy. The two of them ran here and there, looking for scattered Dominator treasures. Half a day later, they had found 20, almost half of all the Dominator treasures. However, Luo Xue was still nowhere to be found. Could it be that Luo Xue was not exiled in the wilderness of time? Su Yu thought to himself. Right at that moment, Yanran suddenly raised her eyebrows and said in surprise, "Strange, they are still alive." She flew over and stood on a cliff. Looking down at the canyon beneath his feet, he could vaguely see two silhouettes carefully picking up a fallen star. "You two, come here." Yanran's face turned cold as she scolded them. The faces of the golden-eyed playboy and Biyun Hongxian changed, and they looked at the top of the cliff in awe. "Lord Yanran." Biyun Hongxian pursed her red lips slightly, and a trace of panic flashed in her eyes. The golden-eyed playboy was slightly calmer, and he said with a smile, "Lord, you are safe and sound. We can finally rest assured." The father and daughter took the star, flew up the cliff, and stood in front of Yanran respectfully. The golden-eyed playboy held up the Dominator treasure and handed it over, saying, "Lord Yanran, please accept it." Yanran did not take it, but stared coldly at Biyun Hongxian. His eyes were filled with a cold light. Traces of murderous intent could be faintly seen in them. "Let me ask you first, how did you two survive?" Yanran squinted and asked suspiciously. Even Dao Lords would die a graveless death before such might, let alone two tiny Dao Lords like them? Golden-eyed Langjun had a look of lingering fear on his face. "Sir, you may not know this, but my father and I are proficient in some secret techniques. We were lucky enough to escape from the fire." The suspicion on Yanran's face dissipated. She knew that this pair of father and daughter had extraordinary abilities. Otherwise, Xiaohao wouldn't have asked them to follow him to the holy city to retrieve the treasure. "Is that so? In that case, do you know what caused such a drastic change?" The golden-eyed gentleman seemed to have been prepared for this. He replied smoothly, "Reporting to my lord, it was a ruler's representative. He coveted a high-grade ruler's magic treasure and plucked it without permission. This caused the wilderness of time to attack him." Yanran frowned. She looked at golden-eyed Langjun, although she knew very well that golden-eyed Langjun was hiding something from her. But on the surface, there was nothing wrong with his answer. When Yanran looked at the ruler's magic treasure, she discovered that its grade was not low. It was a sovereign sword that ranked in the top 10. The might of this sword was comparable to a peak early-stage heavenly Dao Lord, and it was one of the most powerful treasures. Yanran's expression softened a little. She reached out and grabbed it, saying, "Thank you." But right at that moment, Su Yu's soft voice sounded in her ears. "Don't touch that sword." But right at that moment, Su Yu's soft voice sounded in her ears. "Don't touch that sword." After experiencing the threat of death once, Yanran firmly believed in Su Yu's words. Almost at the instant, he retracted his palm. A jade centipede with wings crawled out from under the sword. It was also a ruler's magic treasure, but it was of the lowest grade, and it contained the poison of an early-stage heavenly lawmaster. Not to mention biting it, even coming into contact with its poison would kill one on the spot. Creak! The centipede let out a fierce shriek as it missed its bite. It spread its wings and pounced towards Yanran with incredible speed. Yanran had already collected her thoughts. She took out a mirror with a cold look on her face. The mirror was a low-grade ruler's magic treasure, and it was a defensive treasure. The front of the mirror reflected the centipede. The latter immediately curled up, then petrified and fell to the ground, smashing into pieces. After being used once, the mirror also broke into pieces with a cracking sound. Yanran's face was cold. "How dare you?" She never dreamed that this pair of father and daughter would dare to harm her. If not for Su Yu's warning, she would have been hit. Golden-eyed Longjuan's hollow eyes glanced coldly at Su Yu. "Meddlesome guy." Speaking of which, It was this person who had taken Yanran away in advance. That was why Yanran was able to escape. In his plan, all the ruler's representatives, including Yanran, had to die. But Yanran was an exception. Before Yanran could attack in anger, golden-eyed Langjun took out a scroll. There was an unknown bird drawn in the scroll. Golden-eyed Langjun threw it into the sky, and the bird flew out immediately, carrying the father and daughter away. Yanran was furious. She took out the attacking middle-level ruler's magic treasure and was about to activate it, but Suyu stopped her. Forget it. Finding the magic treasure is more important. Let's talk about our grudges after we leave the time wilderness. Yanran was furious, but Suyu's words were reasonable. Now was not the time to waste time. Of course, the real reason was that Suyu had deliberately let Bai Yun Hongxian go. After all, they were old friends. On the flying bird, Bai Yun Hongxian stood at the tail. Her pair of golden eyes stared at Suyu, slightly frowning. Why did Suyu stop Yanran? With a trace of doubt, Bai Yun Hongxian used her eye technique. Although Suyu had hidden his true appearance, her eyes could see through the future and the past. With a little effort, she could see Suyu's past. A scene remained in her mind. It was when Suyu had not hidden his identity and was with Qin Xiener. They had discussed with each other to rescue a woman named Luo Shui. After looking at it, Bai Yun Hongxian's eyes were full of shock. Su. She slowly closed her mouth and looked at her father behind her. Then, she quickly hid the surprise on her face. Suyu. It was Suyu. He still remembered her, so he stopped Yanran and let them go. Thinking of this, Bai Yun Hongxian's heart was filled with an indescribable joy and relief. It turned out that he had not forgotten her. All of a sudden, Bai Yun Hongxian seemed to have thought of something. She quickly plucked a feather from the bird. She sent a message through the feather, then threw it out. The feather flew silently behind her with the airflow. One of the feathers landed in front of Suyu and fell into his arms. Suyu picked up the feather thoughtfully and gently swept it. When he saw the content, his face changed. Chapter 2632. Suyu immediately raised his head and looked in the direction where Bai Yun Hongxian had left. The latter smiled at him. Suyu waved at her gratefully. Yanran saw this and frowned. Senior, don't be fooled by that little demon. She's not a good person. Oh, Suyu didn't quite understand why Yanran had such a deep prejudice against Bai Yun Hongxian. She even wanted to kill her just now. In Suyu's memory, Bai Yun Hongxian was actually very kind-hearted. She was the complete opposite of her sinister and vicious father. Well, let's go to another place. Suyu changed the subject. His eyes swept around and immediately fell in the southwest direction. He activated the space domain and rushed in the southwest direction. Half a day later, in a mountain range, there was a faint sound of scolding. Suyu remembered that voice. It was the voice of Red Snow Sword. Get over there. Red Snow Sword scolded. Suyu stopped and looked down. He found Red Snow Sword holding a whip, whipping a group of criminals imprisoned in the wilderness of time. They were being made to jump into a pool of boiling lava. The pool of lava was not formed naturally. It was caused by something extremely powerful hitting the ground. Was it a star? However, apart from the boiling lava in the magma pool, there was also a faint trace of extraordinary destructive power. It must have been the raging fire that fell from the sky just now that had merged into the pool of lava. Therefore, no criminal dared to go down. That was an existence that could burn an underground master into ashes in an instant. Who would dare to jump in? You, go down! Red Snow Sword was a little anxious. He kicked a criminal into the pool of lava. The latter was immediately burned by the raging fire. He screamed and struggled to climb up. However, Red Snow Sword stepped down and stepped him into the lava. Don't think about coming out until you pick up that thing. Red Snow Sword scolded. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. Suyu saw it and secretly shook his head. This person was really not trustworthy. On the surface, he was kind, but when it came to interests, he showed his fierce side. However, Suyu was not concerned about him, but the criminals he had captured. Was Luo Xue among them? His eyes swept over them one by one, but there was no trace of Luo Xue. Could it be that he had been pushed into the magma pool and burned to death? Suyu immediately closed his eyes and tried to grasp Luo Xue's fate. A moment later, a ray of light appeared in his mind. His fate was unusually stable, indicating that he was not dead. Senior, that pool of lava should contain a high-grade sovereign treasure, Yanran said with envy. If he could fish it up, Suyu was not in the mood to control the treasure, so he said, "There's no hurry. Let's look elsewhere." As he spoke, there was a sudden splash in the magma pool. A head popped out of the magma pool. A layer of hazy pink mist lingered on the surface of its head, making it look dreamy and illusory. Seeing her, Red Snow Sword revealed a hint of joy. "You got it." The woman nodded. Under the protection of the pink mist on the surface of her body, she was unafraid of the boiling lava and slowly floated to the surface. That figure, that face, who else could it be but Luo Xue? It turned out that she was indeed forced to walk into the magma pool. It was only because the red dust Taoist master's domain was protecting his body that he was not burned by the raging flames. Luo Xue held a fiery red ring in his left hand. It was the second-ranked sovereign treasure, the Tianluo ring. It contained the terrifying blow of a middle-stage heavenly lawmaster, apart from the number 1 ranked magic treasure. There was nothing else that could block this attack. Red Snow Sword snatched it, almost dragging Luo Xue to the ground. He held the Tianluo ring, his eyes filled with incomparable madness. Good, good. This is great. The Tianluo ring is mine. He threw his head back and laughed 3 times, showing his extreme excitement. When he calmed down, he looked at the group of prisoners in front of him with a smile. With a smile on his face, he said, "I've already obtained the item. You can all leave now." The prisoners were wild with joy, turning to flee in all directions. However, no one noticed that the Red Snow Sword had opened its mouth, and a small scarlet sword flew out of its mouth. Swoosh! The small sword flew out rapidly. With Red Snow Sword as the center, it drew a circular sword trajectory in the air. Then, the prisoners who had not yet escaped were all beheaded on the spot. Haha, I'm sorry. In order to keep the secret, I can only make you shut up for now. Red Snow Sword chuckled. Suddenly, he noticed that there was a figure still standing there. You're not dead yet? Red Snow Sword was at the early stage of void nirvana. Among the people in front of him, the strongest was only at the peak of Yellow Tao Master. Red Snow Sword looked at Luo Xue and said in surprise, "It's strange. Your dream realm domain can actually resist the burning of the fire. How rare." As he spoke, he secretly controlled the blood sword to stab out with his hands behind his back. Whoosh! With a sharp sword hum, the blood sword stabbed out. Luo Xue seemed to have expected such a sinister attack. The pink mist on the surface of her body turned into a shield and blocked it. This time, Red Snow Sword became serious. "That's not your domain. Who's hiding in your body?" Luo Xue said coldly, "Scram." But the moment she opened her mouth, she exposed her own weakness. There was no power in her words. She could clearly feel that Luo Xue was like a lamp that had run out of oil. "Is that so? What if I don't scram?" Red Snow Sword sneered and activated the blood sword again. Another terrifying sword shadow attacked. Luo Xue tried to forcefully condense the pink mist, but this time it was impossible. She had already used up a lot of the pink mist in the lava pool. Now that she had reached her limit, she no longer had the strength to mobilize the pink mist. Red Snow Sword sneered in his heart. This sword was enough to kill her. But at that moment, a space domain descended from the sky. The blood-colored sword shadow was immediately trapped in the center, unable to break through. Space domain! Red Snow Sword looked up and his expression changed. It's you! How could he have overlooked Suyu, the first person to obtain the ruler's treasure? And Yanran, who was beside him, was the descendant of the space ruler. Red Snow Sword waved his hand, and the blood sword flew back into his palm. Sir, why did you stop me from attacking? Suyu landed in front of Luo Shuai and said calmly, It's enough for you to get the Tian Luo ring. Why must you be so ruthless? Now that we know you have the Tian Luo ring, are you going to kill us as well? Red Snow Sword laughed. My little friend, you must be joking. You and I are both representatives of the rulers. Why would we? Just as the word you was in midair, the blood-red residual shadow that had been trapped suddenly burst forth with an intense blood-red light. It forcefully broke through the space domain's blockade and shot toward Suyu, who was close to it. Chapter 26:33. Swoosh! The blood-red sword shadow penetrated Suyu's body in an instant. Suyu did not resist at all and was killed just like that. However, before the person could rejoice, his face stiffened again, because after Suyu was killed, he turned into rays of light and dissipated. An illusion? No, not an illusion. Red Snow Sword said incredulously. He could confirm that what was killed just now was not an illusion, but a real existence. While he was in shock, he suddenly sensed a frightening aura of death behind him. Turning his head, he saw it was Suyu. He slapped his back with his palm. Red Snow Sword was shocked at first, but then he calmed down. A mere Nirvana realm existence dared to challenge him? You overestimate yourself. Red Snow Sword turned and slashed. Their palms collided. What shocked Red Snow Sword was that his opponent's mysterious path power was not inferior to his. It was even slightly stronger than his own. Thud, thud, thud. The Red Snow Sword was forced back by the attack. Without thinking, he waved his blood sword. Just as he was about to attack, Red Snow Sword's body suddenly froze there, unable to move. His body, starting from his palm, split into particles the size of dust at a speed visible to the naked eye. It turned out that Suyu's palm just now was not an ordinary palm energy, but a palm that contained the space realm. After that trace of the space realm entered his body, it disintegrated his body from the inside out into countless particles. Ah! The latter let out a scream, trying to activate the Tian Luo ring that he had just obtained. Yenran's eyes and hands were sharp. She used her space domain to teleport over and snatch the Heaven Luo ring. Even the Tian Luo ring was gone. Red Snow Sword had nothing left to rely on. He screamed, Stop now. I have important information for the master representatives of the dream-interrupted realm. Suyu pondered for a moment, then waved his hand. The space realm began to stop activating. With a single thought, it could start again. Don't try to deceive me, or you won't want to see the consequences, Suyu said lightly. He somewhat believed Red Snow Sword's words, because the domain representatives of the Heavenly Awakening Realm and the Nether Realm had gathered together to pluck the Master's treasure. There must be some information that the Realm of Dream Divided Realm did not have. The Red Snow Sword was restricted by Suyu, so it didn't dare to act rashly again. It said dutifully, The Great Master is seriously ill. In the Time Wilderness, there might be the time essence of the Great Master. Before Suyu understood what the time essence was, Yanran had already cried out in alarm, Impossible! Quintessence is the lifeline of a hegemon. Only when a hegemon is about to perish will his quintessence be lost. The Time Sovereign should still be healthy. How could he be facing death? This news was truly earth-shattering. The Time Sovereign was about to die? I'm not lying to you. The two strongest princes and princesses of the Heavenly Awakening Realm and the Nether Realm have asked the Fate Chief Sovereign to divine that the Time Chief Sovereign is seriously ill. Their guess is that the injuries left behind in the past have flared up again. Suyu's eyes flickered, and he believed 80% of his words. This was because, in order to capture Qin Sienna last night, the Time Sovereign had rather ordered the entire city to search for her than personally appear. If he showed himself, he would be able to find Qin Sienna with just a thought. Why didn't he show himself? The reason was worth pondering. The explanation before him explained everything. However, Suyu did not dare to relax. The Time Sovereign was only seriously ill, not really dead. The decree didn't even contain the will of the Time Sovereign, and it was terrifying. Even if the Time Sovereign was dying, a thought could destroy the world. Where is the time essence? Yenran's eyes were burning with passion. It was something even more tempting than the treasure of the Time Sovereign. The red snow sword looked at Suyu and said, "As long as you promise not to kill me, I can lead the way for you." Suyu thought about it and prepared to search his soul. The red snow sword said, "Don't try to search my soul. I have already placed a talisman in my soul. Once someone searches my soul by force, my soul will destroy itself. At that time, no one will tell you the whereabouts of the time essence." He was still quite cautious. Suyu thought about it and nodded slowly. "Okay, I can promise you." The red snow sword was relieved. He looked around and said, "Follow me." Suyu took out the flying treasure and carried all of them on it. The red snow sword personally led the way, and Suyu finally had a chance to comfort Luo Shui. At the moment, Luo Shui was extremely weak. However, his weary eyes were still fixed on Suyu, and he did not even blink. Suyu looked into her eyes and said apologetically, "I'm sorry I'm late." Luo Shui's eyes were red, and she sat in the treasure, crying silently. Suyu was deeply apologetic. She had protected Qin Sienna and Su Kai, or until now, and was finally captured by the Time Sovereign because of them. Fortunately, the Time Sovereign was seriously injured and had not interrogated Luo Shui. Otherwise, she would have suffered even more unimaginable harm. "It's okay now." Suyu patted her shoulder gently. "I will definitely get you out of here." Perhaps it was this sentence that crushed the last bit of strength in her heart. Finally, she could not help but lean on Suyu's shoulder and burst into tears. Years of sadness were vented at this moment. Suyu was speechless. He silently instilled mysterious path energy into her to help her recover from her injuries. Suddenly, Suyu inadvertently sensed that there was a consciousness in Luo Shui's body that was slowly awakening. "It's you!" How could Suyu forget the mysterious red dust path master? After the consciousness awakened, it went straight into Suyu's soul. In Suyu's soul, a sorrowful woman dressed in red was sitting on a willow tree. She stared at Suyu and smiled gently. "It's been a long time, Suyu." Suyu had a complicated look on his face as he said, "Thank you for protecting Luo Shui." Without her help, Luo Shui would have died in the lava pool. "Hee, I once said that I would help Luo Shui win your heart, do you remember?" The red dust path master said meaningfully. Suyu certainly remembered. Before they parted in the Tao Tai's stomach, the red dust path master took over Luo Shui's body and escaped into the Star River. He swore that one day, Luo Shui would win Suyu's heart. "It's impossible now," Suyu said calmly. He already had Sienna and their child. It was impossible for him to entrust his heart to another woman. Is that so? I think it's still possible." The red dust path master smiled mysteriously. Suyu frowned. How could he be so sure? "Very soon you will understand." The red dust path master smiled faintly and withdrew from Suyu's soul. Suyu opened his eyes and saw Luo Shui's puzzled look. "Suyu, what happened to you just now?" Luo Shui asked curiously. No matter how she called out to Suyu, he couldn't hear her. "Oh, it's nothing," Suyu said. His mind was filled with the lingering words of the red dust path master. Would he give his heart to Luo Shui? Or could it be that there was something else in his heart? Chapter 2634. Looking at the endless wilderness of time. Suyu thought about it slowly. How could he leave with Luo Shui? The clay man on the boat was the puppet of the Time Master. If he took the boat, would the Time Master detect him through the clay man? Or would he have to cross the river? Senior, if you can help me get the essence of time, I have a way to send your friend away. In order to fight, Yanran gritted her teeth and went all out. She took out a necklace from her neckline. The necklace was adorned with 81 round beads. Each bead was full and carved with a character from the heavenly book. This is a life-saving item given to me by the Space Master, Yanran said. If all 81 pearls are activated at the same time, we can activate the space domain of a ruler. Perhaps we might even be able to break through this wilderness of time. If we are discovered by the Time Master, I can activate this thing and take you away with me, Yanran said. Originally, Yanran had no intention of taking it out. However, this trip to obtain the essence of time could easily be discovered by the Time Master. If necessary, this thing must be used. When she escaped, she could take Suyu and the others away. Of course, this favor must be given, and she could get Suyu's help. Okay, but first, tell me, what is the essence of time? Suyu asked. Yanran did not hesitate to be discovered by the Time Master to obtain this thing, so it must not be simple. She pursed her lips, pondered for a moment, and said, the essence of time has only one function, to accelerate the evolution of the time domain. Hearing this, Suyu's eyes flashed slightly. As expected, he also wanted to obtain this thing. If he could upgrade the time domain to a high level, his strength would increase greatly. Okay, Suyu agreed. Yanran breathed a sigh of relief. After thinking for a moment, she opened her palm and reluctantly handed over the second-ranked Tianluo ring. Give it back to you, Senior. It was Suyu who defeated the red snow sword just now, so this thing should naturally belong to him. Suyu took it without hesitation. Glancing at the nonchalant red snow sword, his fingertips swept across the space domain, and he opened the space storage that the red snow sword had hidden in his arms. He took out all the things inside. The red snow sword's face turned bitter. He thought Suyu had overlooked it. 10. Yanran was surprised. There were a total of 10 Dominator treasures inside. They were all found by the red snow sword alone. Su, you casually took half of it and gave the other half to Yanran. She smiled and said, Thank you, Senior. Of the 49 treasures, 30 had fallen into the hands of the two of them. The other 19 should be in the hands of golden-eyed Langjun and by Yun Hongxian, who had planned this beforehand. Senior. Yanran wanted to say something, but hesitated. Why don't you come with me and help Xiaohao ascend to the position of ruler? In that case, Xiaohao would be in control of all the treasures. Which descendant of a hegemon could possibly stand up to him? We'll talk about it later, Suyu said calmly. As the two of them conversed, Red Snow Sword suddenly stopped the boat and reminded them telepathically, Look ahead! Suyu and the others looked forward. However, in the wilderness of time in front of them, a huge crater appeared for no reason. It was as if a meteor had fallen and smashed down. Inside the sinkhole, crystal-colored flames spread. At the bottom, there was a crystal drop that looked like a teardrop lying there quietly. Red Snow Sword was excited. As the rumors say, the Time Master is seriously ill, and the time essence in his body has begun to wither. Yanran grabbed the drop of time essence with the power of the mysterious path. However, the strange thing was that the time essence seemed to be in another time and space. It was clearly in front of her, but Yanran couldn't catch it. Damn it! She tried many times in a row, but to no avail, which made Yanran a little anxious. The longer they stayed here, the more danger they would be detected by the Time Master. I'll do it. Suyu stood on the boat, staring at the sinkhole quietly. From his point of view, the flames in the sinkhole were emitting a power that interfered with time. It made time go forward, go backward, and freeze. Yanran didn't understand the time realm, so she couldn't avoid the interference. He stretched out his palm, and a time realm was slowly displayed. Freeze! The time in the surroundings, including the boat, was also frozen in time. His time realm was superior to the power of Time of the Flames. Therefore, it was easily suppressed. In this way, Suyu was unhindered. He raised his hand, and the drop of time essence flew back to his palm. When Suyu was about to look at it, suddenly, another drop of time essence emerged from the bottom of the sinkhole. Suyu looked at Yanran and the others, who were frozen, and flew to the bottom of the sinkhole. He took out the second drop of time essence that emerged. As a result, the third drop emerged from the same place. It was as if there was a spring under the ground, constantly gushing out the time essence. Suyu's eyes flashed, and he stepped on the ground with the tip of his foot, shattering the big earthquake. In a crack, he could clearly see a broken long hair buried in the ground. It was from the long hair that a steady stream of time essence emerged. Is this the hair of the Time Master? Suyu was shocked. Seeing that the time freeze was about to end, he hid the hair and the 2 extra drops of time essence. Then he returned to the flying boat as if nothing had happened, maintaining the posture of collecting the time essence. At this moment, the time freeze ended. Yanran only felt that Suyu in front of her seemed to shake, and then she saw the time essence in his palm. Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you. I got it. Suyu handed the time essence to her. The latter was pleasantly surprised, and a trace of doubt in her heart was washed away. Anyway, the time essence was in her hand, so why should she care so much? Okay, let's go, Yanran said hurriedly, not daring to stay after getting the time essence. Let's go back to the clay figurine boat first. If the Time Master can detect that Luo Xue has been taken away, it won't be too late for me to use the treasure of the Space Master. Suyu certainly had no objection. A drop of time essence in exchange for Yanran using the treasure of the Space Master was a good deal for him. However, the flying boat had just turned around. The sky above their heads suddenly turned fiery red. The sky was like a red-hot molten iron pouring down in torrents. The attack of the time wilderness. They had touched something that they shouldn't have touched, and alarmed the Time Master. Yanran's face was pale. She had no choice but to crush her own treasure of the Space Master. Suddenly, all 81 round beads exploded, and 81 lines of the heavenly book gathered together, condensing into a pair of giant hands made of words. The giant hands went up against the sky, grasped the sky, and then forcefully tore it apart on both sides. Crack! A crack was torn in the sky. Waves of familiar aura from the outside world poured in crazily. The half-real world of the Time Master was really broken. Chapter 2635. How could Suyu and the others dare to hesitate? A group of people rushed out immediately. Yanran and Suyu reacted the fastest. They activated the space domain at the same time and passed through the crack in an instant. Red Snow Sword was a little late. When he arrived at the crack and was about to go through, the sun in the sky suddenly turned into a cold and emotionless eye. Who dares to be so presumptuous in the half-true world? As soon as the words were spoken, thunder roared. The 2 palms that were made up of 81 characters were immediately shattered into sparks. The crack that had appeared closed immediately. No. Red Snow Sword yelled and rushed over. Unfortunately, he still failed. But Red Snow Sword was not worried about being trapped in the wilderness of time forever, but about facing that eye. It was formed by the will of the Time Master. Master, I am the representative of the Heavenly Awakening Realm's Brahma Sky, Great Emperor. I have come to exchange for the treasure of the Time Master. Please let me go, Red Snow Sword said in fear. The ice slowly closed and turned into a sun again. From beginning to end, it did not look at Red Snow Sword. It was as if in its heart, Red Snow Sword was just an ant. Red Snow Sword's whole body was wet with sweat. The Time Master did not say a word or even look at him, but he still had the illusion that he was walking on the edge of destruction. Fortunately, the Time Master did not care about him at all. That was why he was lucky enough to survive. He wiped the cold sweat off his body and prepared to return to the River of Time and take a small boat back. But just as he was about to leave, a sigh echoed between heaven and earth. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. I am not dead yet, and you dare to covet my essence of time? The voice came from nowhere, sweeping across heaven and earth. It could be heard in every corner. Red Snow, sword listened. He slowly closed his eyes, and the vitality and soul in his body suddenly disappeared, like a candle flame being blown out. His body also turned into sparks and dissipated in the air. A sigh could kill people from thousands of miles away. Su Yu, Yanran, and Luo Shui escaped the crack with great difficulty. They found themselves in the sky above the sacred city. Not far below their feet was the entrance to the Hall of Masters. The two did not dare to hesitate and were about to leave. However, a faint sigh could be heard. Yanran screamed in pain, her body trembling uncontrollably. His soul and life force were diminishing at a visible rate. It was the same for Suyu. He felt as if the flame of his life had been blown away by a gust of wind. Fortunately, the voice was extremely faint, almost undetectable. They only felt a momentary pain. Yanran's face was pale, and there was a lingering fear on her face. Without a doubt, that faint sigh belonged to the ruler of time. Fortunately, she decisively activated the magic treasure and directly left the time wilderness. Otherwise, the consequences of facing the sovereign sigh would be unimaginable. Su Yu composed himself and said, "Let's go back to the upper palace." The three of them returned. The two of them had a tacit understanding that they didn't mention what had happened in the wilderness of time to the other Hegemon descendants. Only they themselves knew about the many treasures they possessed. In the guest room, Qin Xianer and Luo Shui hugged each other and cried, "I'm sorry, Sister Shui. I've made you suffer." Qin Xianer felt extremely guilty and didn't know how to make it up to Luo Shui. Su Kai was grinning from ear to ear, and her small face was overflowing with pleasant surprise. She looked at Suyu with a gentler look and less indifferent look. Luo Shui was very familiar with the mother and daughter. She poked Su Kai's nose teasingly. "If you want to repay me, then be my daughter." "Okay, Su Kai threw herself into her arms, smiling. "By the way, how long will I be gone?" Suyu asked. Qin Xianer said, "Just one night." Just one night? He had waited in the Hall of Masters for half a month, and he had spent a lot of time in the wilderness of time. However, time was frozen in the wilderness of time. As a result, there was only one night left for Su Yu to leave. "Why do you ask, brother Yu?" Qin Xianer asked. Su Yu thought about it and said, "I think the time ruler might really be at her limit." The time crystals of the transfer order, the falling hair. There was also the upcoming competition for the time ruler. Everything pointed to the imminent fall of the time ruler. However, why was the time ruler injured? After killing the ancient god Juyu, the time ruler should not have fought with any strong men. Where did the injury come from? "I think the wilderness of time was prepared by the time ruler to delay the injury," Suyu said. "Only in the frozen domain of time would the injury on her body be fixed." "Oh," Qin Xianer said with a poker face. "In that case, the time ruler will not leave the wilderness of time easily." Su Yu was quite sure of this. "For the next 6 months, everyone will cultivate here in peace," Suyu said. He had to wait for the 9 moons to align in half a year for the day when the ancient tomb of the demon faction appeared. After settling them down, Suyu went to the secret room alone. He took out the hair of the time ruler. After a period of precipitation, 3 drops of time essence dripped from the hair. Together with the original 2 drops, there were 5 drops of time essence in total. Su Yu's eyes narrowed, trying to force more time essence out of the hair. However, none of the methods worked. It seemed that he could only wait for it to drip out. Just as he was thinking about other ways, a hoarse voice came slowly. "Don't waste your energy. You can't do anything to the hair of the time ruler." The air trembled slightly, and a strange old man suddenly appeared in front of Suyu. His gray hair almost reached his waist, giving off an extremely disheveled feeling. His eyes were also closed. It was such an old man who ignored the restrictions outside the secret room and appeared directly in front of Suyu. The old man stood quietly in front of Suyu with a walking stick. However, Suyu's expression was very calm, and he was not surprised at the appearance of the old man. "Oh, it seems that you knew I would appear? You even know who I am?" The long-haired old man smiled calmly. Suyu shook his head. "There are only a few people who do good deeds without leaving their names. You are obviously not one of them." At first, when he passed through the test of the giant mouth, it was obvious that he was about to be detected in the 8 domains, but it was very strange that the giant mouth did not detect it. It was the same for both tests. At that time, Suyu knew that there was an invisible expert secretly helping him. Otherwise, he would have been exposed long ago. Therefore, Suyu had been mentally prepared that this expert might come to him. There must be a reason for the other party to help him. "Oh, you're really smart. No wonder you can come out of the time wilderness alive." The long-haired old man laughed hoarsely. "Suyu said calmly, what I brought back from the time wilderness should belong to you. Or what do you want? You can also say it." Chapter 2636. He looked at the hair in Suyu's hand, and then at Suyu's space storage device. He knew everything that Suyu had obtained, but he wanted it all. "What I want is a favor from you," Suyu said calmly. "Elder, you are more than 100 times more capable than me. Why do you need to owe me a favor?" He had thought that the old man wanted to help him because he wanted to obtain something from the wilderness of time. It turned out that was not the case. "There is one thing that I can't do. I need you to do it for me." The old man slowly took out a wooden box. "I hope you can bring the wooden box to someone." Suyu's eyes flashed. "Who?" The old man smiled. "When the master appears, the wooden box will react. You just need to carry it with you." Suyu pondered for a moment and accepted the wooden box. "As a token of appreciation, I can help you a little." The old man's fingers gently touched the hair. The black strands of hair turned transparent. It was visible to the naked eye, full of drops of time essence. There were as many as 100 drops. "I have refined the hair for you. When the wooden box is handed over to the master, the time essence in the hair will flow out automatically." In other words, the 100 drops of time essence would only be handed over to Suyu after he completed the task. After that, the old man smiled. "I wish you good luck." After waiting for him to leave, Suyu touched the wooden box in his palm. Why did he think that I would meet the person he was waiting for? Suyu was suspicious. The old man's strength was too mysterious. What he had told him was also puzzling. He thought for a moment and tried to open the wooden box. According to what he had thought, there must be a powerful seal inside the wooden box, making it difficult to open. Unexpectedly, Suyu opened the wooden box with a light flick. Suyu was startled and immediately looked into the wooden box, but it was empty. After thinking for a moment, Suyu tried to check the wooden box itself. It was made of precious divine wood, but it was not unusual. The mysterious old man's focus was not on the wooden box. Suyu couldn't figure it out for a moment. It was a little strange. Why did the old man say that when the wooden box met the person it was intended to give, it would react? With some doubts, Suyu kept the wooden box properly. For the 100 time essence in the strand of hair, just a wooden box was not a problem at all. The time essence in the hair couldn't be counted on for the time being, but there were still 5 drops of time essence. With a thought, the 5 drops of time essence lined up in the air. Suyu's soul probed into the first drop of time essence. In an instant, a profound comprehension of time surged into his soul. After some time, Suyu slowly opened his eyes, which were filled with shock. As expected of the Time Master, his comprehension of the realm of time is really extraordinary. Su Yu couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. He thought that his time domain was not bad. However, when he saw these insights, he realized that he had only scratched the surface of the Tao of Time. Time crystal! He made a grabbing motion with his palm. The eternal time of the world was grasped in Su Yu's palm. As he clenched his fist, the time actually condensed into a crystal. Su Yu was no stranger to such crystals. Time crystal! Su Yu's pupils contracted slightly. So this was how the time crystal came about. The Time Master could condense the time of the world into a crystal with a casual grab. Probably in this world, apart from the Time Master, Su Yu was the second person who could create time crystals. Staring at the remaining time essence, Su Yu immediately closed his eyes, immersed himself in it, and continued to comprehend. Time passed slowly. Half a year later, in the training room where Su Yu was, there were already many time crystals that others coveted. There were no less than 300 million of them. However, the comprehension of half a year was not the most important thing. The most important thing was Su Yu's finger gently tapped in front of him, and a figure flickered out. It was a figure that was very similar to Su Yu. However, if one looked closely, one could still see the obvious difference. That was, this illusory Su Yu seemed to be slightly more mature than the original Su Yu. Their cultivations were almost the same. The illusory Su Yu turned around, looked at the original body, and said with satisfaction, "As expected of the Time Master, you can even cultivate this kind of time incarnation." Yes, the illusory Su Yu was a kind of time incarnation. He could summon Su Yu from a few months, or even a few years later to the present time. Unfortunately, due to certain limitations, the strength of the time incarnation summoned by Su Yu did not change much. If the Time Master used it himself, he could even summon himself for millions or tens of millions of years later. Moreover, at that time he would have more powerful strength. However, Su Yu had an advantage that the Time Master could never achieve. That was, the time incarnation created by the Time Master could only last for a cup of tea's time at most. It would be crushed by the current time. But Su Yu was different. The time incarnation created by him was also integrated with the soul realm's one thought to become real. In this way, his body could exist for more than a whole day. Original body, you have to strengthen your cultivation. If you can also summon your past self, it is equivalent to having the past, the present, and the future at the same time. 3 Su Yu, the time incarnation encouraged. 3 superimposed. It is terrifying to think about. 1 Su Yu was already powerful, but 3 Su Yu joined forces, and all 3 of them were connected. Each of them was resourceful and full of magical powers. That scene was probably a nightmare for any enemy. Su Yu rolled his eyes. Will I be as talkative as you in the future? The time incarnation laughed. Fine, this is the first time we meet. When you are in trouble, you can summon me. After saying that, the time incarnation disappeared without the consent of the original body. This made Su Yu smile bitterly. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? The time incarnation did not listen to the orders of the original body at all, and even regarded himself as the future incarnation, faintly superior to him. However, as the future incarnation had said, the strongest comprehension of the Time Master was that the future, the present, and the past appeared at the same time and space. It was equivalent to 3 Time Masters fighting. This was one of the things that the other masters feared the most about the Time Master. In a sense, the combat power of the Time Master was the most invincible. I wonder if the essence of time in that hair contains the comprehension of the past incarnation. Su Yu's eyes were full of expectation. After half a year of cultivation, Su Yu had gained a lot. After calculating the time, he immediately came out. In the guest room, Qin Xianer, Su Kai, Luo Xue, and Huang Fuyi were all cultivating seriously. With Su Yu's huge resources and the occasional guidance of the incarnation, the 4 of them made rapid progress in their cultivation, especially Qin Xianer. She was the descendant of the ancient god Jiu Yu, so her cultivation was unique. she did not even need to cultivate. With the divine fire of the 9 serenities devouring all kinds of precious martial arts resources, she could break through the realm. Chapter 2637. What else could Suyu say besides feeling helpless about this kind of breakthrough method? Every time he broke through a realm, he would have to painstakingly search for all kinds of high-level martial arts resources. Qin Xianer, on the other hand, could break through without doing anything. Both of you are the descendants of the ancient gods. Why is there such a huge difference? Su Yu was a little disappointed. Apart from giving him the divine 9-dragon cauldron, the ancient god Jiulong needed Su Yu to fight for everything else. Even the most important 8 great domains of ancient god Jiulong had been achieved by Su Yu himself, one step at a time, and he had experienced countless dangers before he succeeded. Qin Xianer giggled. What's mine is brother Yu's. Su Yu laughed. At that moment, Yao Guang's voice came from outside the door. Senior, it's about time. Should we head out? Today was the 9 moons linked pearl day, and it was also the place where the demonic sect's ancient tomb might appear. The 7 hegemon descendants of the upper palace all wanted to explore the devil path's ancient tomb. Let's go. Su Yu took a deep breath. Saving Yunyazi had been Su Yu's wish for many years. This time he had to achieve his wish. Xian wait here quietly and don't leave the guest room, Su Yu instructed. Half a year had passed, and the search for Qin Xian and Su Kai had long since died down. However, there was still plenty of time for the sovereign's personal guards to patrol the city. Don't worry, brother Yu, Qin Xian said. She still had a sense of propriety. Su Yu looked at Su Kai and said, Kai, stay with your mother and don't be naughty, understand? Su Kai tilted her head and said awkwardly, Oh, Kai, say goodbye to father, Qin Xian said. Su Kai stubbornly pursed her lips and didn't say a word. Although they had spent some time together, Su Kai was still unable to accept him completely. It's fine. Su Yu shook his head and used his gaze to stop Qin Xianer, who was about to criticize Su Kai. There's still a long way to go. Let's slowly mend our relationship. After leaving the guest room, Su Yu followed Yao Guang to the great hall. Yanran, Luluo, and the other hegemon descendants were waiting there. Senior Su, I'll be counting on you this time. Luluo smiled shyly. Su Yu nodded. No problem. The group of 8 arrived at the sacred city square. The place was already crowded with people. Many experts appeared one after another. Among them, there was no lack of early-stage Dao lords. There was even a faint flicker of the aura of a mid-stage Dao lord. Yao Guang and the others covered their bodies and faces with black robes. There would definitely be a mix of fish and dragons in this mission to kill the holy fiends. For many years, the Upper Palace had been enjoying all kinds of resources in the holy city, which would more or less cause some experts to be envious. They didn't dare to do anything in the sacred city. However, that might not be the case in the chaotic scene of the capture of a saint fiend. Therefore, it was best for them to hide their identities and not be discovered by others. The appearance of the holy demon has attracted the attention of many experts, Yao Guang said in a low voice. Yanran nodded in agreement. Just from the people we recognize, there are famous experts from the heavenly awakening realm, the severed dream realm, and the nether realm. Apart from them, there are also many local leaders from the holy city. These were just the ones they recognized. Look, the people from the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce have appeared. Su Yu's heart shook, and he followed Yanran's gaze. A group of experts of different ages gathered in a corner. Their clothing had the unique logo of the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. The Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. Su Yu's eyes gleamed. The Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce had always been ambitious. It wasn't a good thing for them to join the siege of the holy demon. Experts from all sides gathered in the sacred city square one after another. When the sky began to darken and the 9 moons began to line up, however, It was obvious that the time domain, which had existed for eternity, was rapidly weakening. When the 9 moons lined up, the time domain was gone. The hourglass above everyone's heads disappeared at the same time. A sense of relief lingered in everyone's hearts. From the depths of the sky, a deep and indifferent voice reverberated. The holy demon is hiding in the southwest, 300 miles away. The voice rolled away. A bolt of lightning descended at that moment, bombarding the old district of the sacred city. Su Yu's eyes flashed slightly. It was indeed there. He had found the old district by following the demonic energy that day. Let's go. Yanran activated the space domain and arrived first with the people from the upper palace. In the end, when they used the space domain, there was someone who was 1 step ahead of them. That was the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. Each of them was holding an extraordinarily advanced space-time treasure, and they arrived first. Yanran was envious. The Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce was so generous. Looking down, they saw a pitch-black cave that had been pierced through by lightning, revealing itself in front of them. Wisps of demonic aura that could make one go berserk rose from it. The ancient tomb of the demon faction could indeed be here. Su Yu was filled with anticipation. After the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce, he quickly entered the cave. After a long period of darkness, a faint light began to shine in front of him. At the end of the cave, a blood-red world came into view. Bolts of blood-red lightning flashed from time to time at the end of the world, illuminating the world as if it were blood. Under the illumination of the lightning, coffins could be seen neatly lined up. Every coffin was filled with a deathly aura that made one shudder. Where is this? Yao Guang and the others were bewildered. This was completely different from the hiding place of the holy demon. In his imagination, the hiding place should have gathered endless resources. Why was it all a cemetery? However, the people of the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce were very calm and even a little happy. Finally found it the ancient tomb of the demon faction. There were 10 people from the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. However, the other 9 people's postures were like stars surrounding the moon, placing the person who spoke at the center of it all. Yao Guang and the others were slightly surprised. They had heard of the famous ancient tomb of the demon faction. It was said that it was a huge and fierce dark force. When the leader of the force died, he would be buried in the ancient tomb of the demon faction. They had never thought that the ancient tomb of the demon faction would be under the holy city. Yan Rant's eyes flickered, and she made a grabbing motion with her hand. Then, she pulled out a burial item from the nearest coffin. A 30,000-year-old water pearl. Yanran could not help but exclaim. The water pearl was a crystal condensed by a water soul demon at the level of an earth master. Its function was to heal soul injuries. In the outside world, a 3,000-year-old water pearl could be sold for a sky-high price. At its peak, it could even reach 10 billion time crystals. In front of him, with a casual grab, he actually took out a 30,000 years old water pearl. Its value was already an astronomical figure. No one in the entire time zone could afford it. This action shocked the other descendants of the rulers, and they opened the coffins one after another. In the end, there were shocking burial objects in all the coffins. Even the worst had billions of time crystals. At this time, a large number of people rushed in. Chapter 2638. Su Yu was not interested in the funerary objects. What he was interested in was the corpses inside. Surprisingly, none of the corpses were rotten. They were all perfectly preserved. Isn't it said that only the leaders can be buried here? Su Yu looked at the tens of thousands of coffins in front of him, his heart full of doubts. How could the demon faction have so many leaders? If the ones buried in those coffins were not the leaders of the demon faction, then what were they? At that moment, Su Yu noticed that the people from the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce were exchanging glances with each other, communicating with their souls. After a while, they left a few people here, while another group of people walked to the center. Su Yu used his gaze to look over, and he suddenly discovered that there was a golden coffin lying in the middle of it. He subconsciously took out a jade bottle. The pure demonic energy in the bottle was circulating wildly, as if it was about to rush out of the jade bottle. Suyu opened the bottle cap, and the pure demonic energy turned into a sharp arrow, shooting toward the golden coffin. The holy demon! Suyu's heart beat slightly. "Step back," Suyu said slowly in a low voice. Yao Guang was about to go to the golden coffin in the center. "Elder, did you find anything?" Yao Guang and the other descendants of the rulers asked as they stepped back. Suyu nodded. "Yanran, be ready to lead everyone to escape." Based on his contact with the holy demon, the power of the holy demon was beyond imagination. The Road Master was no match for it, unless the Time Master personally intervened. At the same time, Suyu's eyes searched quickly for the whereabouts of the sinful Lady Palace. He searched according to the image in the Tai Haoyan mirror. Something that caused his pupils to shrink violently appeared. On the cliff in the deepest part of the demon faction's ancient tomb, a magnificent hall hanging alone came into view. The hall was old and shabby, but it exuded an aura that was incompatible with the demon faction's ancient tomb. There was a sense of evil in that aura. It was the path of sin that the sinful lady had cultivated. The sinful Lady Palace. Suyu clenched his fists. He had finally found it. After running for decades, he had finally found the sinful Lady Palace and found the hope of resurrecting Yunyazi. At that moment, the people from the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce had arrived in front of the golden coffin. They were working together to open the lid of the coffin. Those who arrived later rushed over because they had also discovered the existence of the golden coffin. Creak! With a crisp sound, a crack finally appeared on the golden coffin cover under the joint efforts of several experts from the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. Suyu's heart thumped wildly, and he had a bad feeling about this. Yao Guang took out her tortoise shell and performed a divination on the spot. In the end, it was a very inauspicious hexagram. "Let's leave this place first," Yao Guang said decisively. Suyu took a look at the sinful Lady Palace and suppressed the reluctance in his heart. He then said, "Retreat." The disbelief in his heart grew stronger and stronger. This kind of uneasiness often indicated a great threat of life and death. Yanran nodded. She immediately unleashed her spatial domain and carried them away through the cave. When he returned to the ground, Suyu's uneasy feeling receded like a tide. More and more people were still rushing down the cave. "Let's see what's going on inside." Yanran took out a magic treasure and tossed it into the air. An image was projected into the air. It turned out that before she left, Yanran had placed a talisman in it. The runes could transmit the situation in the fiend sect's ancient tomb to the Dharma treasure before him. In the projection, the people from the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce finally opened a finger-sized crack on the golden coffin. Bang! Before they could see clearly what was in the golden coffin, the lid of the coffin suddenly shot up into the sky and was slapped away by a tremendous force. Then, a ferocious, ghostly claw swept across the image. The member of the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce, who was responsible for opening the lid of the coffin, was instantly turned into a cloud of blood mist. What was even more terrifying was that within the range that the talisman could see, all living creatures were turned into ashes by the ghostly claw. In the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of strong men were killed. Among them, there were even existences at the level of the Path Masters. None of the living creatures escaped. The blood-red ancient tomb of the fiend sect immediately turned into a river of blood and became a living hell. Fortunately, the people who were further away were not affected at all. Yanran activated the talisman in the air and changed her perspective. She found that with the few remaining strong men from the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce as the boundary, they and the strong men behind them were all safe and sound. However, the horrifying scene in front of them caused the people who were rushing in to retreat in fear. They wanted to leave. However, a large number of people were rushing in, and it was impossible for them to rush out through the cave. For a moment, the scene was extremely chaotic. I miscalculated. A bone-chilling sigh came from the golden coffin. Clatter! A ferocious, ghostly claw stretched out from the golden coffin and grabbed the edge of the coffin. Then, a terrifying living creature, whose body was rotting and surging with demonic aura, slowly sat up from the golden coffin. It had a pair of dark green eyes that burned with green flames. Its head turned and looked at the panicking crowd. The Time Master actually sent a motley crew like you hear. Is he really going to die soon? Creak, creak. The sound of bones rubbing against each other could be heard. The rotting body slowly stood up from the golden coffin. Traces of pitch-black liquid fell from its body and dripped onto the golden coffin, making a sizzling sound. At this moment, the living creatures in the ancient tomb of the Fiend sect were even more terrified. Some of them even screamed in fear. "Holy demon, our Alliance Master is interested in you. Come back with us." A rhythmic and metallic voice slowly floated over. It was the core member of the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. He was short and looked like a child, but his face was extremely old. The holy demon lifted its foot and walked out of the golden coffin. The 8 chains binding his body immediately let out creaking sounds. The Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. What an ancient name! The holy demon murmured. If the Alliance Master of the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce came personally, I might have to be wary. You can shut up now. As soon as it said this, thousands of thunderbolts rumbled and fell. Thousands of people were burned to ashes on the spot. Since the Time Master is treating you as a greeting gift, I shall accept it. The holy demon pulled the chains in its hand. The entire ancient tomb of the Fiend sect shook violently. Astonishing life waves came from the neatly placed coffins. Crack, crack. The coffins broke open one by one. The corpses inside all opened their eyes and revealed a fierce glint as they pounced toward the nearest living creatures. Tens of thousands of corpses were all resurrected. Corpse race. They are all corpse race. They were not corpses. They were clearly corpse race members who had fallen into a deep sleep. Moreover, after being personally nurtured by the holy demon, the cultivation of each corpse race member was incredibly powerful. Many strong men were caught off guard and were pounced on by the corpse race. Once bitten, they were immediately transformed into corpse race members. Su Yu's pupils shrank as he watched. He had come into contact with many corpse race members, but he had never seen such a rapid transformation. Moreover, there were a few corpse race members whose cultivation was terrifyingly high. Suddenly, Su Yu stared at a corpse race member, his expression stiff. Chapter 2639. It was a female corpse clan member. She was dressed in a graceful and luxurious brocade robe, and her hair fell like a waterfall on the back of her shoulders. Her fair complexion exuded a peerless beauty. She was in the blood-red sky, but she was like a pearl, reflecting a brilliance that was hard to ignore. All the corpse clan members were greedily tearing at the living creatures. Only she was standing in the distance. She was like the female empress, overlooking the surroundings and watching her soldiers fight. The pearl female corpse. Su Yu uttered the name that he hadn't heard for a long time, one word at a time. How could he forget Pearl? The Pearl Corpse King, who was deeply in love with him when he first entered the Great Beginning Realm? Later, he mistakenly thought that he was killed by the sinful Lady Palace. He led his own corpse clan members to find the sinful Lady Palace for revenge. 100 years passed. Time passed quickly. Time had worn away memories, diluted dreams, and obliterated the original intentions. The only thing that could not be worn away, diluted, and obliterated was the Pearl Corpse King's desire for revenge. He thought that the Pearl Corpse King had stopped in a certain civilization and stopped moving forward. However, she never stopped. From that small half-star civilization, she crossed millions of stars, crossed the barriers of heaven and earth, and arrived in front of the sinful lady palace. At this moment, Su Yu's heart trembled. A surge of deep warmth surged in his heart, causing him to be moved in a way that he hadn't felt in a long time. 100 years have passed, and the world has changed. Only you are the same as before. Su Yu stared at the beautiful figure, and a trace of tears slowly overflowed from his eyes. Pearl, Pearl, how could I bear your undying love for 100 years? For revenge, you would rather die than destroy it? At this moment, the scene suddenly changed. The old child finally made a move. Light shone behind him, and a Buddha statue appeared faintly behind him. Great Master Shi Ming. The Buddha statue stretched out its palm and pressed down gently. Many of the corpse clan members immediately retreated into the shadows in fear. The light was like a nemesis to many evil spirits. Only the holy demon looked calm. No matter how many rays of light hit him, he did not move. Petty tricks. The holy demon flicked his finger. The old child let out a muffled groan. The giant Buddha behind him shed 2 lines of tears and quickly dimmed. Saint. Several experts from the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce immediately supported the old child and said in panic. A sage was a peak existence at the late stage of the Tao Lord realm. He searched the time domain several times, but he could not find many enemies that he could fight. But who would have thought that in front of the holy demon, the enemy would not be able to defeat him with just a flick of his finger? All of you step down. The holy devil calendar has been cultivating for a long time, and he has absorbed the legacy of the ancient god of the netherworld. He has already reached the heavenly Tao Lord realm. The old child's face was as pale as paper. With a tap of his foot, a spatial ripple rippled out and enveloped all of them. The saint demon said indifferently, "You want to leave after disturbing this old man." Chi, the chains on his body, suddenly swept across. Several members of the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce immediately screamed and turned into a mist of blood. Only the old child forcefully held onto the chain with both hands. Shock was written all over his face. Saint Demon, the legacy of the ancient god of the Nine Nether, was left for his successor. How can you be worthy of the trust of the ancient god of the Nine Nether by stealing from him? As it turned out, when ancient god Nine Nether died, he had used his transcendent divine arts to seal or protect his 4 most trusted protectors. All of them had the legacy left behind by the ancient god of the Nine Nether. Moreover, he had given them a mission. That was to leave the legacy for his successor in the future. When the 4 legacy gathered on his successor, a new ancient god of the Nine Nether would be born. The other 3 protectors were still missing. Only the Saint Demon was still there. However, he did not listen to the orders of the ancient god of the Nine Nether and monopolize the legacy that belonged to the successor of the ancient god of the Nine Nether. Only then could he break through the shackles of his realm and become the heavenly Tao Lord. The sky has changed and the earth has changed. This is no longer the era of the ancient gods. No matter how pedantically I obey the orders of the ancient god, I will sooner or later disappear from this world with the legacy. The Saint Demon spoke with conviction. He glanced at the old child. I see that your strength is passable. Come under my command. Once I unify the time domain, you will be rewarded for your service. The child smiled and shook his head. Saint Demon, you overestimate yourself and underestimate the ruler. He is everywhere, everywhere. After saying this, the old child slowly closed his eyes. At the same time, rays of light erupted from his body, illuminating his entire body. Then he stood there motionlessly. The Saint Demon withdrew his chains and said calmly, "You would rather die than be under my command?" The Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce is not full of motley crew. Without the resistance of the experts of the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce, the corpse race was no longer hindered. The experts who entered the ancient tomb of the demon sect were all transformed into corpse race members. Not a single one escaped. Only those experts who had not entered the cave were lucky enough to escape. The ancient tomb of the demon sect became quiet again. The Saint Demon said calmly, "Let's go. Since we have been exposed, we can't stay here any longer." The Pearl Corpse King turned around and looked at the sinful Lady Palace with empty eyes. "It's just an empty shell. Why do you care?" The Saint Demon said. He waved his hand, and an astonishing demonic fog surged out from the ground of the ancient tomb of the demon sect and enveloped all the corpse race members, including the Saint Demon himself. Then he disappeared without a trace. Yanran and the others were shocked. "It's gone. How can it be?" Yao Guang said, "If I were the Saint Demon, I would also leave a way to escape. Otherwise, if I were discovered one day, I would be like a turtle in a jar. Look at the order in which the coffins were placed." Yanran discovered something. Looking down from above, she discovered something. It was a formation. It turned out that the Saint Demon had been prepared and had hidden the formation under the coffins. It could be transported away at any time through the formation. Swoosh! While they were talking, Suyu had already ventured underground again. He came to the place where the Pearl Corpse King had stood, feeling lost. Why did the Pearl Corpse King become the subordinate of the Saint Demon? Was it forced, or did it voluntarily? Where was she going now? Staring at the empty world, Suyu kept asking himself. The only thing he was sure of was that they would meet again soon. The Saint Demon was ambitious and would never be content in one place. He would definitely find the right time to come out again and occupy the time domain. That might be the day he would truly meet the Pearl Corpse King. "Look, there seems to be a great hall over there." Yanran and the others came down one after another, searching for the remaining resources in the coffins while searching the surroundings. The sinful Lady Palace was naturally discovered. Suyu returned to his senses and said, "Wait a moment." His figure was like a rainbow as he crossed the cliff and arrived in front of the sinful Lady Palace. A crooked hall with the words Danfeng Palace came into view. Is this hall only a part of the sinful Lady Palace? Suyu's eyes darkened. He stepped inside. The fake mountain was ruined. The small spring dried up and the fairy plants decayed. There was nothing inside. In the deepest part, in a lotus pond, it had long since dried up. Numerous withered lotus flowers were left with only the outlines of dust. Suyu felt a tightness in his chest and clenched his fists tightly. He had found the sinful Lady Palace. He had gone through countless hardships and twists and turns, but what he found was only an empty shell. Just as he had worried before, the sinful lady had been missing for many years. Were her former subordinates still loyal to her? Could the sinful lotus be preserved? Now it seemed that everything would develop in the worst-case scenario. In fact, even if the members of the sinful Lady Palace did not betray her, the sinful lotus could not possibly still be there. This palace was deep in the ancient tomb of the demonic faction, right under the nose of the Saint Demon. If there really was a divine object of heaven and earth that the sinful lady had nurtured for an era, would the Saint Demon turn a blind eye? The answer was no. Suyu stood in front of the lotus pond, feeling extremely depressed. "Master, what should I do?" Suyu shouted. He had really tried his best. Drip! Suddenly, Suyu felt a burning sensation in his chest. He touched it with his hand and found the sinful lady's soul crystal nucleus. It was emitting a scorching light that was extremely dazzling. Suyu was confused. The soul crystal nucleus had been with him for decades and had not shown any changes. Why did it suddenly react now? He glanced at the lotus pond. Suyu's heart skipped a beat. With a wave of his sleeves, the entire lotus pond was cleaned up. At the bottom of the lotus pond, there was a depression the size of a thumb. It was the soul crystal nucleus. Could it be? Suyu was a little excited as he placed the soul crystal nucleus into the depression. Walala! What followed was the sound of water. Looking sideways from the bottom of the lotus pond, An unknown clear spiritual water was gushing out, quickly covering the bottom of the pond. Suyu jumped out immediately. Under his incredulous gaze, lotuses of various colors bloomed in the spiritual water at a speed visible to the naked eye. Some were pink, some were white, and some were light yellow. However, one of the lotuses was the most peculiar. Its entire body was black. It was like an elegant swan, standing among the lotuses and dancing. Shreds of evil intent were slowly released from the lotus. Sinful lotus. Suyu was indescribably excited. As expected, the sinful lotus had always existed in the sinful lady palace, but it could only appear when the soul crystal nucleus was present. Suyu's disappointed heart was once again filled with joy. With a wave of his palm, he took out the soul crystal nucleus and looked quietly at the slowly unfolding sinful lotus. The sinful lotus unfolded, revealing a pitch-black pistil. The pistil was swallowing shreds of a special aura. That aura was extremely corrosive. Suyu's eyelids twitched, sensing danger. The sinful lady once said that there was a shred of Yunyazi's soul in her soul crystal nucleus. However, her soul crystal nucleus is too hard. Nothing in this world can break it. Only the sinful lotus can melt it. Once it's melted, I can take out a shred of Yunyazi's soul. With Suyu's current soul attainments, it would be easy to revive Yunyazi with the help of this shred of soul. Suyu could not contain his excitement. With a flick of his finger, he shot the soul crystal nucleus into the sinful lotus. As expected, the hard soul crystal nucleus began to melt, turning into crystal clear, liquid droplets. The soul that had been sealed within finally broke free and drifted into nothingness. Suyu's eyes were sharp, and he caught hold of it before it dissipated. He then stuffed it into his own soul and nourished it with his own soul energy. Feeling the familiar soul that he had not seen for a long time, Suyu could finally put down the huge rock that had been hanging in his heart for countless years. "Master, we meet again." Suyu smiled knowingly, looking at the soul crystal nucleus that was left with only liquid. Suyu's eyes were filled with a complicated look. A man's words are kind when he is about to die. You were thinking of me before you died, so consider this as atonement for your sins. Suyu said, "I forgive you." After saying this, he turned around and left without looking back. What he did not know was that, not long after he left, the soul crystal nucleus that had turned into liquid began to condense again. Chapter 2640. In the blink of an eye, it condensed into a thumb-sized transparent person. She clumsily picked up the pistil of the sin lotus and started to chew on it. With every bite, his body grew bigger. Half a cup of tea later, she swallowed the last bit of the pistil of the sin lotus. Her body had already returned to the size of a normal human. The curvaceous body of a woman appeared. Furthermore, the color of his skin began to appear on his originally translucent body. Not long after, a beautiful body with skin as white as snow and as exquisite as suet jade appeared in a natural posture. His facial features gradually became clearer. Her eyes were like gems, her eyebrows were thin like willow leaves, and her cheeks were flawless. The beauty she emitted was enough to cause the world to lose its color and all the flowers to lose their luster. There was no one else in the world who could match her appearance. If Suyu was still here, he would surely be able to recognize it. It was Xia Jingyu's face. Exactly the same face. The peerless beauty gently crooked her finger, and the lotus leaf of the sin lotus turned into a mass of black air and attached itself to her side, turning into a brand new black dress. The petals of the nefarious lotus transformed into a pitch-black lotus imprint that was branded between his brows. In the blink of an eye, the crystal core transformed into the black-clothed Xia Jingyu. She gently grasped the stem of the lotus flower with her palm. The pole immediately burst into black flames and burned on its own. But after the fire, what was left was a long sword that was as black as ink. Shockingly, that sword was the sin sword. Finally, the black-clothed Xia Jingyu stepped on the lotus pond with the tip of her foot. The lotus pond split open, revealing a pitch-black lotus root. She picked up the lotus root, bit by bit, and ate it. With every mouthful, her cultivation base would rise by a large realm. When she finished eating the lotus, her cultivation actually surpassed the Tao Master and reached the level of the Heaven Tao Master. They were even slightly more powerful than the holy demon. Who? The black-clothed Xia Jingyu exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. A look of relief appeared on his face. The origin world that I spent most of my life and effort to create in the past was finally not wasted. The black-robed Xia Jingyu, or more accurately speaking, she was a sinful woman. Long before he chased after Yun Yazi, was schemed against by Emperor Xiaoyao, and was imprisoned in the Taotai cage. She had left a backup plan. He cut off half of his body and sealed it in the true evil Lotus world. If there came a day when the other half of his body was destroyed, as long as his soul could return to the true evil Lotus world, he would be able to escape. Then he could wake up the other half that was sleeping. The sinful girl sat at the edge of the lotus pond. He held the sword in one hand and pressed it against the ground. His other hand rested on his knee. He slowly closed his eyes. A gust of wind blew over, blowing a layer of black mist from his body. His eyes slowly opened. His eyes were filled with hatred. So, I was Mirrorflower Heavenly Prince's vessel from the very beginning. Sinful girl sighed as she received the information from the other half of her body. She was obsessed with martial arts. But in the end, from the moment she was born, she was destined to be someone else's bride. Yun Yazi! She tightly gripped the hilt of her sword, her eyes filled with extreme guilt. You were killed by me, and your soul was nearly destroyed. But even in death, you hid the truth from me. You didn't want to tell me that I was a vessel. A sparkling teardrop slid down her face. It was regret and self-blame. If she could turn back time, she would definitely want to be that young girl who cultivated martial arts wholeheartedly under Yun Yazi's guidance. Unfortunately, nothing would change. I will pay you back what I owe you, but not now. The sinful girl slowly stood up. Her eyes shone with a divine light that looked down on the world. Xiaoyao, son of heaven, you plotted against me and Yun Yazi. I will make you pay with your blood. She would pay Yun Yazi's debt, but the premise was that she would pay Xiaoyao, son of heaven, back. The world, my sinful girl, is back. With a long roar, the ancient tomb of the demon sect shook. On the ground, the 9 moons that formed a line seemed to be greatly disturbed, and their trajectories were extremely chaotic. The moons even collided with each other. In the time domain, countless sentient beings fled in a panic, as if some extremely terrifying being had descended upon them. In the time wilderness, on a worn-out hourglass, an old man closed his eyes and sat powerlessly on the throne that was formed by time. Suddenly, the old man opened his eyes. A trace of horror flashed in his eyes. Sinful girl. The old man stood up, trembling. With a wave of his hand, a vast river of time appeared in front of him. In the river of time, many reflections of time flashed past. The scene of the sinful girl being suppressed in the Taotai, the scene of the sinful girl being killed by Suyu, all of these scenes were extremely real. How is she still alive? The old man asked the heavens, his eyes filled with shock. Could it be that the sinful girl has cultivated to the real world and become an immortal being? Among the almighty beings, the one who mastered the real world could live forever. Otherwise, even if he was the master of time and controlled the time of the world, he would still die and perish. No wonder the sinful girl was easily suppressed in the Tao Tai's cage. It turns out that it was only half of her body that was suppressed. The old man's body trembled. A trace of fear filled the depths of his eyes. As expected of the number 1 person under the emperor, the old man exclaimed, the world is really going to be in chaos. The end of the era was imminent, but the sinful girl had reappeared in the world. Somewhere, The holy demon led the Pearl Corpse King and others to hide in the dark. Suddenly, the holy demon looked in the direction of the ancient tomb of the demon sect, his eyes sharp. Sinful girl, she's not dead? The Pearl Corpse King beside him, her calm face suddenly gave off a strong murderous aura. Sinful girl, she's not dead? Where is she? The Pearl Corpse King roared as if enraged. The many corpses behind him roared and roared at the same time. The holy demon pressed his hand down. Don't act rashly. The terror of the sinful girl is beyond your imagination. Rashly seeking revenge will only add to your ashes. The Pearl Corpse King's eyes flashed with resistance, but for some reason, the words of the holy demon were absolute orders to her, making the Pearl Corpse King unable to struggle free. Not only the sacred city, in the 3 great realms of the time domain, many strong men sensed the appearance of a sinful aura. Even the other dominion domains far away could sense its existence. The entire 8-star civilization was in an inexplicable shock because of the rebirth of the sinful girl. Suyu, who had just left the ground, suddenly felt his heart palpitate. It was as if something underground had awakened. What's going on? Yao Guang asked in surprise. Yanran was equally puzzled. Should we go back and take a look? Luluwa suggested. Suyu thought for a moment, his eyes flashing slightly. Let's go. He was worried. Could it be that he had melted the soul crystal nucleus, causing some kind of drastic change? However, just as they were about to set off, the entire ground suddenly caved in. Suyu and the others immediately soared into the air. Lowering his head to take a look, his expression changed. The whole ground had completely collapsed. The ancient tomb of the demon sect was completely submerged. Yao Guang was bewildered. Suyu sensed an unusual aura from the ruins. Chapter 2641. He was right. He had indeed sensed the aura of the sinful girl. But wasn't she already dead? Or was there another secret in the soul crystal core? Suyu laughed self-mockingly as he recalled the sinful woman's remorseful request before her death. In the end, I still underestimated the sinful woman. In a sense, he had been tricked by the sinful woman. However, even though he knew that the sinful woman might come back to life, Suyu would still go back on his word and melt the soul crystal nucleus. As long as he could revive Yunyazi, everything else wouldn't be a problem. Everyone returned to the upper palace first. The 7 Hegemon descendants had found quite a few treasures in the coffins, and they needed time to digest them. Suyu also had an extremely important matter to attend to. In a flash, he arrived at the secret chamber. Looking at the strand of soul in his palm, his heart was filled with excitement. Master, I've kept you waiting for a long time. A wisp of life force started gathering in Suyu's palm. Prepare to activate resurrection. However, at this moment, a voice rang out. I suggest that you wait a little longer. It was the Soul Dominator who spoke. Suyu's hand paused and he asked why. The Soul Dominator said, Do you think you can restore his soul to its peak with your attainments in the domain of life? This question was very profound. Suyu's heart jumped. After muttering to himself for a long time, he slowly shook his head. I can only restore it to the moment of his death. When he died, his soul was only at the level of an emperor of heaven and earth. Not even Master Xiandao had reached that level. You only have one chance to resurrect him. The Soul Dominator asked, Do you want to revive Yunyazi when he's an emperor of heaven and earth, or a Yunyazi in his prime? Suyu hesitated. Of course. He hoped that the former could see him as soon as possible to make up for the guilt in his heart. However, reason told him that he should choose the latter. If he were to be resurrected to the moment before his death, it would take a long time for his soul to recover to its peak. He believed that this was not what Yunyazi wanted to see. What are the conditions for me to return to my peak? Suyu asked. Become the Life Dominator or receive the Life Dominator's help, or attain the Origin Dominator's life domain yourself, the Soul Dominator said faintly. Su Yu clenched his teeth. After some thought, he retracted the thread of Yun Yazi's soul. He had already waited for so long. So what if he waited a little longer, as long as he could restore Yun Yazi to his peak? The Soul Dominator nodded in satisfaction. Your choice is wise. After a pause, the Soul Dominator said, Shangcheng, leave as soon as possible. I sense the Time Dominator just now. Su Yu was shocked. Even when ancient god Ninether's successor appeared, the Time God did not appear. But now he showed himself? If he stayed any longer in the sacred city, he would really be in unpredictable danger. Thank you for reminding me, Su Yu said. 3 days later, the descendants of the masters of the upper palace invited Su Yu to a banquet. They had gained a lot from this trip to the demonic sect's ancient tomb, so they were in a good mood. Sirs, I think I should bid farewell to all of you, Su Yu said as he cupped his fists at them. To tell the truth, he had a pretty good impression of the descendants of the hegemons, Yao Guang and the other side. Su Yu had said that he would leave after the ancient tomb of the demon faction. It was the end of the banquet. Luluwa said reluctantly, Thank you for your guidance these days. Luluwa can't thank you enough. Luluwa had learned a lot about the time domain from Su Yu. Yanran also said, You saved my life. Yanran will never forget it. Senior, where are you going next? The other descendants of the hegemons were fine, but Yanran was most concerned about Su Yu's whereabouts. She hoped to use Su Yu's strength to help Xiaohao ascend to the position of the hegemons. Su Yu thought for a while and said, Travel the world. He did not want to expose that he was assisting the Star Rain Empress. I see. Yanran was regretful, but she did not give up. She said, Senior, you once said that you need a treasure that can accelerate time by 10,000 times. I will ask Xiaohao. Please leave your communication method. If there is any progress, Yanran will inform you immediately. All right. Su Yu immediately gave Yanran a communication magical treasure. If there is a chance, we will meet again. Su Yu said goodbye in public. He had put Qin Xianer and the others into a special space storage. It would not be a problem to take them out of the sacred city without being discovered. However, Su Yu did not leave the sacred city after leaving the upper palace. He came to a corner. There was a very secret, abandoned house there. Who is it? The accompanying tunnel master shouted. It's me. It was only because he could see Su Yu that he opened the seal on the roof of the house and let Su Yu in. As soon as he entered, Su Yu found a group of people in the yard. They were from different races, and their faces were filled with pride. But they did have the right to be proud, because every one of them had reached the level of a tunnel master. One of them had even reached the peak of the early stage of the Tunnel Master and was almost at the middle stage of the Earth Path Master. They only glanced at Su Yu's entrance and paid him no mind. Everyone, this is the Lord Su that I mentioned. He is also the person in charge of recruiting you. The Tunnel Master introduced. The Tunnel Master with the highest cultivation was a middle-aged man from the Swan clan. He had an elegant and proud temperament. You are recruiting us? The other party looked Su Yu up and down with a critical eye and shook his head slightly. You are a human and a nirvana completion martial artist at that. As he spoke, he strode out and said without turning his head, Wait until you are sincere. Otherwise, don't waste my time. The rest of the people frowned. Are you kidding me? A mere human can recruit so many of us tunnel masters? Sigh, I thought some big shot was recruiting and needed our services. It turns out not bad. Before Su Yu went into seclusion, he gave the tunnel masters a task. Recruit strong tunnel masters as much as possible. There were too few tunnel masters under the rule of the Star Rain Empress. The only ones willing to listen to her orders were the 10 guards under her command, but she had already lost 4 of them. There were not many left around her. She needed a group of powerful and obedient tunnel masters. It's just some time crystals. I can still afford it, Su said calmly. The man from the Swan clan stopped and turned his head. Human, you need 1 billion time crystals a year to recruit me. Are you sure you can afford it? Su did not say a word and took out a space storage device. He threw it into the air, and an infinite number of time crystals fell from it. There were 10 billion of them. The tunnel masters who were about to leave stopped in their tracks, their pupils constricting. 10 years. If you come with me, you can take it now. Su said lightly. The middle-aged man from the Swan clan was in disbelief. But if he went back now, he would lose face. Cough. I am a man with aspirations, not just money. The middle-aged man from the Swan clan said proudly.